warmest of welcome to the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan Review Committee. This is a first for us, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you here, also our two independent commissioners, which will do introductions shortly. Councillor Wharehinga, will you open with Karakia for us? Thank you.
Your Worship, me no te whānau. Te whakamuinga, kia koe me te lehu i ngā mātou, hina mai ke au, ke tika ki te punu i a mātou, sua mai te wahi o te manaki, te āwhine te āki hoki a mātou. Nei mātou e tū nui tu aroaro, a tuku I tēnei enui, I rungi te ngō ki mātou kai whako. Raiti, Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. Okay, just quickly before we do our introductions, I do want to welcome everyone online as well. We have Drew there, we've got our admin people, we have Yvonne, our CEO Nadine, our Māori responsiveness champion Jean, and I do know that we have Councillor Parata joining us shortly as well. She is unwell and she will be listening in and just be part of our discussions. So without further ado, I am going to ask everyone to do a short introduction. When I say short, I mean for people that we don't know, 30 seconds. For people that we do know, maybe a minute. So we're going to start, Yannick, we're going to start with you. We're going to whip around and we'll end on that side.
It's quite easy, thank you, Your Worship. Tēnā tātou, Yannick Slupski. I'm Principal Policy Advisor here at GDC, and I am the workstream lead for Freshwater and taking care of forestry business as well.
Yeah, I'm Rob Telfer, first term councillor, not actually on this committee, but just sitting in.
Larry Foster, fifth term councillor, and very interested in the whole Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan.
Morena tātou, Aubrey Ria. I am a first term Māori Ward councillor, born and bred over there in Kaiti, and currently reside out there at the country with my beautiful family. I'm extremely excited about this committee, and I have lots of questions today, whānau, so
there we go. Well, kia ora tātou everyone. My name is Rihit Stoltz. I'm the Mayor here at the Gisborne District Council. This is a huge piece of work we have ahead of us, but exciting to make sure that our plan is fit for purpose. So everyone here, buckle up. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you.
Morena tātou, Joe Noble, Director Sustainable Futures. I am the sponsor and overall champion for the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan Review, and I take all the credit when the team are doing some
Nice.
Morena koutou, ko Charlotte Knight Tokuiwa. I'm the Strategic Planning Manager here at Council. As most of you know, my team is responsible for any sort of the policy stuff that you see come across your desk, climate change response, a variety of other extra little add-ons every now and then. And similar to Joe, I get to quite often take credit when the team does awesome mahi. So,
Kia ora, Colin Alder, first-time councillor, farm most of my life, semi-retired, Manitoki, close to a river. Thank you.
Tēnā korua, ko Josh Wharehinga tōku ingoa. My name is Josh. I'm fourth term councillor, so myself and Larry are kind of old guys around me. I would never say that our mayor is one of the older, youthful. Yeah. Fourth term councillor, second term deputy mayor. RMA, got myself and Larry have our RMA accreditations. I'm our only current RMA qualified chair. Really nice to get back into this RMA space, considering that we've kind of gone through COVID, cyclones, things like that. So we kind of get into this really meaty thing. I'm really excited about us on this journey.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, ko Sarah Stevenson tōku ingoa, Independent Commissioner, and incredibly honoured to be supporting Gisborne District Council and iwi members when they join us on the committee. Loving the enthusiasm for resource management. To add to the uncertainty of the last few years, I'd throw in the reforms, which were a slight diversion for all of us, but massive opportunity now. Kia ora.
Orana te whānau o Tairāwhiti, ko Alan Taku anō Clan Matheson te iwi.
Tiaraha te monga e tiara te kāinga. Waiho te awa, waikato tainui, tangata whenua. Morning, murene everyone. I'm Alan Matheson. I currently live in Otatahi, Christchurch, and have been there for the last 10 years. Very privileged to be here with you. It's only when I come back to places like this that I realise, yes, Christchurch is a very flat and white place. And I feel like I find my home when I come back to places like Lisbon. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to working with you all over the next few months. Kia ora.
Morena tātou, Paula Hanson, Senior Policy Planner, also co-lead in developing RPS, Regional Policy Statement, provisions within the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan.
We've got some of our directors in the back as well. Yes, you thought you were hiding. The ever-seeing eye of the mayor has spotted you. Go, Michelle.
Kia ora, ko Michelle Fry, I'm the Director of Liverpool, so parks, pools, museums, theatres, libraries, integrated catchment, kia ora, and solid waste.
Morena, ko Tim Barry Tokuinua. I'm Director of Community Lifelines, and we have played a little part in the development of this, but it's quite influential in how we roll out our infrastructure.
Desiree. There's no hiding today, people. I'm just letting you know.
I'm sitting here for a specific reason. Ko Desiree deploy aho. I was listening to Charlotte and Joe. If they take all the credit, they will ask me why do things go wrong. So I'm the coordinator, making sure things happen. Been in Gisborne 15 years, 7 years in council, and very excited that we actually have the first meeting of the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Desiree. Ladies.
Kia ora tātou, ko Kelsey Goldsmith Tokuinua. I am a policy planner here at GDC, so I'm working on the RPS at the moment, the regional policy statement, so I'm just here to watch and listen.
Thank you. Morena tātou, ko te amihiata whainga mōka Tokuinua, he kai whakamahere, kaupapa here au I konei, te kaunihira. My name is Te Amihiata, and I started on Monday as a policy planner, so I'm just here to really kind of catch up and learn what's ahead of us. Kia ora.
Yes, Melanie, yes.
Kia ora everybody, my name is Melanie Thornton. I'm the comms manager for the council. And of course, this is a big interest for me because we do a lot of media releases and a lot of media inquiries about this particular topic, so it's very interesting for us.
Heather, I'm coming your way.
Morena koutou. I'm Heather, I'm the Democracy Manager. Good journey for us because we have a dedicated resource in our committee Secretariat Governance Advisor space to support the TREP review. Staff are changing in that space, but yeah, it's going to be a good journey.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. Jess.
Kia ora koutou, Jessica Taylor, I'm the minute taker. Kia ora.
Nadine.
Tēnā tātou. Tutahi mihi kia korua, nau mai, hara mai ki Wainganui ki a tātou. I'm Nadine Thatcher Swan, I'm the Chief Executive, and I'm really sorry I couldn't be here today. It's actually a really auspicious occasion, finally standing up the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan Committee. And I also just want to acknowledge our councillors for being really brave and bold in this space and welcoming in two independent commissioners around the table to help support this journey for our region. It's significant mahi, and we're really happy to have you both on board, Sarah and Alan. So I'm looking forward to meeting you in the flesh in person. But at the moment, I'm just in Wellington and hoping to bring back some gold from tonight's awards. But I'm really stoked to see this committee up in action and welcome. And I'm sure there's going to be some robust discussion today. Ngā mihi.
Thank you. Winnie, you are next.
Me?
Mm-hmm. You. Just introduce yourself.
Oh, aloha mai, morena tātou. Ko rawani a rātou parata ahau, e noho ana hau ki roa torea. I am a first term Māori ward councillor. I'm really excited for where this mahi will take us as a region, and I know we've been waiting a long time to establish it and get it going, so it's really exciting to be part of it.
Thank you, Rowania, and we hope you feel better soon. Please take breaks. Next, we have Drew.
Yeah, all. Drew Williams, Principal in the TRMP review team. Recently led on the future development strategy, now working on predominantly district plan provisions of the TRMP.
Thank you, Drew. Yvonne.
Kia ora tātou, no te whanganui a Tairāwhiti, ko Yvonne Lagarde toko ingoa. I am one of the principal planners working on the TRMP review, and I work together with Paula on the regional policy statement provisions currently.
Thank you. Lucky last, Mr. Jean Takarua.
Tamari e kia tātou, a tuatai ake mi ana kia koe, Councillor Wharehinga nau, te rangi i tui ki te whenua, kia timata ai tō tātou nei hui, te ata nei, mihi hoki kia kōrua ngā kai komi ana hau, nau mai, hara mai me ki, ko mai ipurangi tēnei, ki te whare o te awarua tērā, tautoko katoa ana Dean Whakaro, ana Dean Kōrero, e pāna ki tō kōrua tainga mai ki tēnei o ngā hui huinga. Jean Takarua, Chief Advisor Māori out of the CEO office. Kia ora tātou.
Ariana, I don't want to mess you off, but sometimes that is just the technical support, so I didn't want to be rude. But anyway, we are all here. Everyone now have a vague idea who's who in the zoo, and we will get to know each other so much better over time. I'm just going to quickly go through. We have no apologies. Do we have any declarations of interest? Anything, Alan or Sarah, that you need to declare with us? Any councillors? Nothing at this stage. If you become aware of something as we go through our agendas, please let us know. No leave of absence. Are there any acknowledgement and tributes that I am not aware of? No, it doesn't look like that. We have no public input and petitions for today. We have no extraordinary business. We have no notices of motion or adjourned businesses. So I'll quickly talk to you about how today will look. So we will be out of here the latest at 12 today. And what I thought would be good for everyone, if we start with our noting reports. Councillors over time have had some updates as we have gone through work, but I think it's really good for us today to start on page 237 and go through the overview of the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan and then also the progress, and people can ask some questions. There are no dumb questions. Just as an update, 3 of our councillors on the committee has done the RMA Commissioner training. Mine expired a while back. Larry has done, Josh is the current chair, but we also need to accommodate councillors that are new to this journey. So I do want to make sure we take everyone on this journey and give enough opportunity for everyone to ask their questions and have the input they need. After that, I think we'll take a break, have a cup of tea, and then we'll start from the front of our agenda and talk about the policy work, the overlay 3B, and end on our upper Mōtū catchment. So without further ado, Joe, I'm going to hand over to you, councillors and members. We will be moving to page 237 of our agenda, and we will just sit back and talk a little bit about what we are doing, what our plans are, why are we doing it, and what we want to achieve.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I didn't intend to say too much, so just as a brief introduction, obviously we're developing a new Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan under the Resource Management Act, which is that overriding piece of legislation to set up the sustainable management of natural and physical resources in the country. There is a whole suite of national direction that we need to make sure we give effect to and reflect in our planning documents. So that's national policy statements and regulations and standards. We do have an existing combined Tairāwhiti resource management plan, so that's everything from the regional policy statement that sets that overall overarching integrated strategic direction for resource management in the region, and our regional plans, including our regional freshwater plan, our coastal plan provisions, and then our district plan, which is where we get into those land use provisions, zoning, residential use, those things that tend to affect people in their day-to-day lives. Some of you are probably well aware of all of this, but that's sort of a brief, very brief introduction to the Resource Management Act. There are some components that are mandatory that we must do, so we must have a regional policy statement, for example. We must have a coastal plan. There are other bits that will have some discretion. And we also have some national planning standards that we have to make sure that we work to. So there are ways that we have to structure our plan and ways we even have to number our provisions. So that's a new national planning standard that we don't reflect in our current TRMP. As you hopefully know, we are currently working across 3 work streams in phase 1, one being the regional policy statement led by Yvonne and Paula. And that's where we need to identify the regionally significant resource management issues for our region, and also the issues of significance for iwi. And then we set objectives, so what we want to achieve, and policies to get there, and then the detail of the rules and the more detailed policy provisions and schedules and mapping comes in the rest of the TRMP, the regional and district plan provisions. So that's a really important document because everything else in the plan needs to give effect to that regional policy statement. So what you put in there, although there aren't rules in that part, it does sort of frame up the whole of the document, so it is an important component. Then we have our freshwater planning work stream, so that's a huge kaupapa. Been working on that for some years now. You'll know we have an existing regional freshwater planning provisions and Waipawa Catchment plan developed under the national policy statement as it existed at the time. Obviously it's been through changes since. We're now working to the 2020 version. We're going to have 7 catchment plans overall. That's the intent. We need to review the Waipawa Catchment Plan, which is a big topic for our region because it includes the Poverty Bay Flats, and nearly all of our water abstraction and use occurs in that area at the moment. Huge amount of consented activity, really important for the regional economic development of the region as well, as also our municipal water supply, so of huge interest. We have in the agenda pack the draft proposed Mōtū catchment plan. That process started some years ago now, but we haven't managed to notify that due to COVID and then cyclones sort of pushing out the work programme. Janek Schlupski is the lead of the freshwater planning work stream and also has picked up forestry in his spare time. Lucky Janek. So obviously forestry, huge for our region. We do have a lot of forestry land use. Again, huge contributor to regional economic development. We have a lot of highly erodible land, a lot of land that went into forestry after Cyclone Bola back in the late 80s, early 90s, to try and hold some of that land in place. And as we're seeing now, it's not worked in all areas. It's not to say that we don't want forestry, but we need to be really careful about where forestry does and doesn't occur and how it is harvested and managed. So another huge topic. And then last but not least, our 3rd work stream is referred to both as urban growth and development and the district plan. So we do have a housing shortage in Tairāwhiti, and we also are growing. So for many years, the thought was that the population was static, but actually since 2018 onwards, we've seen that our population is increasing. So that combined with a housing shortfall and also some inadequate existing housing means that we do need to provide for more dwellings in Tairāwhiti, and we have the future development strategy that was recently adopted that provides a framework for where that development can occur, and now we need to make sure that the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan reflects that too, alongside our infrastructure planning. So that is a very brief introduction to a huge topic. Hopefully this is refreshing your memory rather than being brand new information. But now is your chance really to ask information so you know you have the right sort of ground knowledge entering into this committee, and no stupid questions.
I just wanted to say there's absolutely no stupid questions because it is so complex and it looks very simple when you look at that, but it is not that simple. So I do want, especially our new councillors, please feel free to ask questions so that you can put some puzzle pieces together to see how it works and what knowledge pieces you might be looking for going forward. So please, the floor is open now for anyone who want to ask a question, even if it's not high-level strategic questions at this stage. I think ask the questions so that you can find your feet. And I'm going to open with you, Councillor Ria, because you said you've got lots of questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that probably you don't know what you don't know, so more questions will come in the future. I suppose just looking over the first lot of documents, I would really like to see a consistency and a really good understanding of some of the Te Ao Māori worldviews and Māori languaging that we're using, and some consistency as well. We've just finished our 3-year plan. We have a focus around oranga wai, oranga whenua, oranga tangata. So to see that terminology weaved throughout different committees and reports so that they are all binding together and working together in order to achieve those goals that we set as a council. So there's that aspect of it, but also there's this kind of grey area where kupu Māori or Māori words have been used in policy and legislation, and they've been slightly removed from their actual holistic meaning. And so when they're used in a sentence, so I'm glad Gina's online because a lot of my questions actually are around those kinds of things, and I totally understand that they may have been recommended by members of the community, or they're being templated off different pieces of work from other councils or pieces of legislation. But I'm hoping that amongst us we can get a collective understanding of kupu that we will use, particularly around mana and mauri, and we'll be able to, I suppose, uniquely use them, because we won't be able to ever achieve the full holistic meaning, but also it's more than just the written meaning or the translated meaning. So it might take a bit of massaging between strategy, policy, the Māori responsiveness team, and some feed-ins and feedbacks around kind of massaging where is our comfortable place within the use of that terminology and those concepts.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor Tairāwhiti.
Just wanted to clarify, because I'm not actually on the committee,
you participate, you can just not vote. So you can ask questions and you can be part of it, but you won't vote. So you're very welcome to ask questions. Any other? Larry?
As we go through all these different plans and the changes that we're going to do based on the RMA, and knowing full well that the RMA are going through a process of reform as well, there's going to be a bit of backtracking from an original plan that might have been done, and then some of the new interpretations coming through from the reform. So is that going to be easily managed?
Through Your Worship,
How is that going to be?
obviously we keep a very close eye on what's happening at the national level. One thing I would say is no matter what the overarching legislation looks like, I suppose management of our natural and physical environment is something that needs to occur. The challenges remain, no matter what legislation you're working under. The need to engage with the community and work with them whenua remains. So what we try and do as staff is do the best we can to do good evidence-based work that reflects the community voice and Tāngata Whenua aspirations and views, and then we can easily, it will depend on what the legislation looks like, but we then have to adapt that to reflect the overarching legislation. But as long as we're sure that the work that we're doing is good work, reflects the information, the best knowledge that we have, reflects the community voice, reflects what we've heard from our iwi and Tāngata Whenua partners, then that's sort of the best that we can do. And just keep that watching brief. We're involved in working parties. We work closely with the other regional sector as well, in particular. We, always just keeping that watching eye on what's ahead of us. And usually there is quite a long lead in time because governments realise that you can't just turn on a dime.
And we did see that with the previous Reform Acts that came out that was since been repealed around that transition period. And it is a little bit of a lengthy period too. So I guess, if we stopped and waited for it, then we would never do it. Yeah, basically, in a nutshell.
I'd just like to make a standing early on. And as the overall thing, it's great that we are looking to our environment and protecting it as best we can. And, we're consulting with Tāngata Whenua, iwi. I do, however, feel there's a slight gap in that maybe we're not giving enough credibility to intergenerational farmers out there and whether their knowledge is going to be drawn on, particularly when some of our decisions can and will drastically affect their businesses. We're going to be drawing on scientific experts and reading science, you can get conflicting opinions. And in fact, the decision to put pine trees in was the best science of the day. And there were lots of people around after Bola that knew that pine trees on Class 8 land was wrong. And so I'm just saying that, what am I saying? That we need to keep a very broad vision on who we consult with and be very aware of who we're going to affect with our decisions. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Josh?
Maybe this might be an opportunity maybe to kind of expand on what the consultation process looks like in terms of rolling out the pieces of the plan. This isn't a short thing, right? And we have to. It's a kaupapa that we have to take our entire region on the journey of. So
maybe talk about that process and the hearing, because there will be hearings and opportunity for the community to take part there. So maybe expand a little bit just on that process going forward.
Yep. So, thank you, Your Worship, through you. As noted in the report, we do intend, there's sort of a number of different consultation and engagement strands planned. So I'll talk in brief. In terms of the regional policy statement, for example, we are looking to go out with a draft plan. So it's not statutory in any way, it's not formal, just to get initial feedback. Are we on the right track? What's missing, what's not? We have already undertaken in terms of that some engagement, just very high level. These are the issues, what do you think, community? And it's drawing on the consultation we did back on Tairāwhiti 2050, the regional spatial plan as well. So that was quite an extensive consultation exercise. So we're drawing all that information to in as well, what we've heard through the community-led recovery plans, what we've heard through the 3-year plan engagement. So that's the approach in terms of the regional policy statement, and then there may be some targeted engagement needed as well. And then Tāngata Whenua engagement too. We have had the iwi technicians working alongside us. We're now figuring out what that looks like from here. Sort of, we ran the trial and we're now looking at how we continue the process in a way that reflects and suits the needs of each of the iwi, because they all understandably
have a few technicians.
No, not yet, unfortunately, and that sort of capacity is really hard. There's lots of demands on iwi in terms of consultation and engagement, and it's a real struggle to find the time to input. So we're trying to work with each iwi to figure out what works best without putting too much of a burden on. For example, a couple of iwi are looking to develop environmental management plans that will then feed straight into the regional policy statement, but the timing is a bit of an issue there because they may not be able to develop those in time to be reflected in the regional policy statement. In terms of the freshwater planning process, as you will know, we've been setting up catchment groups, and they reflect a diverse range of interests within the catchment, so farmers, foresters, those with more of an environmental focus, recreational users, and tāngata whenua as well. And very much people with a link to the catchment who live, work, play in the catchment rather than bringing in national representatives, for example. So that's the way we're working within the catchments, and then there's also some iwi and hapu engagement separate to that as well. And again, that varies between iwi and hapu. Sometimes it's very place-based, sometimes it's a sort of more holistic approach. There'll be a strand looking at water allocation in particular, because that's of strong interest to tāngata whenua. And then in terms of the district plan, so those urban growth and development provisions, there's already been quite a lot of engagement through the future development strategy. That involved workshops, involved going to marae, open days, wandering around the CBD, talking to property owners, being at the farmers market, and those kind of approaches will continue as well throughout the work streams, whether it be drop-in days, going to where the people are. And that's all leading up into we release drafts, we get feedback back, and then we enter into the formal process, which is when we actually have a proposed plan change. So this is starting that journey where people make their formal submissions, and then we summarise all of those submissions, feed those back out, and then people can make further submissions on those submissions. So if someone suggested something and you go, I don't like that, as a member of the community, then you can say why you don't like it and what you think should happen. And then we move into the hearings, which again is another quite a process. You thought the 3-year plan hearings were a big job. You probably haven't seen anything yet. So we have the RMA hearings. Often people will bring their technical experts along. If they're the more sort of, those more au fait with the Resource Management Act, they may bring lawyers along. And that can be, I did a regional coastal plan in Bay of Plenty. I think we had 4 weeks of hearings.
I sat on our freshwater plan as the councillor with Councillor Bold for weeks on end. And that was probably 2018, and we only adopted after all the appeals only in August last year. So it just shows you the process isn't something we write a report, make a decision and go out. It is mass. Every 50,000 people are involved, and it is a process regulated by legislation, but you mix in with that personalities and different interests and different aspirations as well, and it can become quite complex.
Yeah, it does, and there are appeal rights as well. The freshwater planning process is slightly different. It goes to an independent hearing panel with the freshwater commissioners, and there are limited rights of appeal. Other provisions come to a hearing panel set up by council, and that can be councillors, a mix of councillors and commissioners, or you could choose for that all to be independent commissioners who then hear the submissions, make the recommendations. Ultimately, it's council that decides what goes in the final plan after receiving all that information back. But things can be appealed if someone doesn't think you've got it right.
Yeah, well, a few of us on hearings committees, if we're in this committee here now, are we conflicted on that hearings committee?
No, you can still be on that hearings committee.
Councillor
now I want to ask my questions. So I wanted to ask a question in regards to, it's linked to what Councillor Foster was talking about around the RMA changes, but are you able to speak, I guess, to mobility of the TRMP in light of the fact that we're often subject to a lot of changes of national policy statements, of implementations and creation of new kind of policy statements? Are you able to kind of talk about the mobility of our plan moving forward?
So while we're in sort of the drafting phase and still in draft, we can be quite agile. Once a plan change is notified, then it becomes harder to make changes without going back through a formal process to sort of re-notify the changes that you've made. So at the moment, we're still in a relatively agile phase. I say relatively.
The next question I wanted to ask is just with the bringing of forestry from phase 2 into phase 1, which I 100% support. Your sense of our team capacity in order to be able to deliver on that? You know, just acknowledging we have Captain Tairāwhiti holding all of the shields right now, but yeah, so be able to just kind of speak to that.
Through Your Worship, that is an ongoing challenge. We have been on a bit of a recruitment drive at the moment, and that's still ongoing. We have also been securing some additional external consultant support, but it would be fair to say we never have as many people as we would like with all the skills and expertise we would like.
Probably just a pain point that we may have to just monitor over the journey of doing this TRMP and subsequent plans that drop out.
Rowenia, you can go next. Thank you.
Sorry, excuse me. I think this mahi, the TRMP mahi, is probably going to be the hardest learning curve. Lots of it feels very, very technical, and while I'm keen to participate and offer my thoughts and opinions as we go, will just note early on that this will be hard learning for me, and that I hope to be able to contribute, but I can't really do that until I really get my head around the technicalities of it. And I think it would be remiss of me to say that it's straightforward, that there is a lot of sort of technical regulations that we need to follow in this space, more so probably than any of the other spaces that we work in. The only thing I just wanted to note, I guess, is in the list of catchments, I didn't see Awatere. And is that because Awatere itself is not a catchment? It falls under Waikura. Somebody explain that to me?
Yannick. Thank you, Rowenia. Yannick will speak now.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Awatere catchment is nested within a range of catchments. It's called the Northern Catchment Area. So we'll be looking at that within the context of that wider spatial catchment area, for want of better words. But yes.
But sorry, can I have a supplementary question?
All good.
Yeah. So in the list of catchments that we've got, I think that was page
246.
Yep, 246. 246. Is Waipawa, Mōtū, Southern, Waimata, Uawa, Waiapu, Wharikahika, Waikura. I note that Te Ara isn't listed there specifically, and that Awatere isn't listed there specifically. Is it too much of a pain to have those explicitly listed, or is it captured elsewhere? Like, does it not need to be said?
Through you, Your Worship. The Tiarai is a part of the Waipawa Catchment Plan, and we recognise the Tiarai as a freshwater management unit within that catchment area. In terms of the Wharikahika Waikura catchment, we can certainly recognise the Awatere. I guess just, we've got probably about 100 catchments of varying sizes across the Rohe, and really what we tried to do is aggregate as best we could to make the planning process a little bit more efficient for us. And what that means obviously is the naming becomes a little bit challenging. But what I would say, Councillor, is that once we do enter the Wharikahika Waikura planning process, then we can have a kōrero about an appropriate naming and how we recognise Awatere within the context.
May I just suggest that it maybe it might be helpful to have like in brackets which other awa also fall under this particular area, and I think that will help with any other confusions. But appreciate the answer and accept that they are being considered, and naming will happen at a later date. Thank you so much for the mahi and the report. I'm happy to move it.
Thank you, Rowenia. And I just wanted to add, you're a new councillor. Even for experienced councillors, this is an intimidating piece of work. It is not straightforward, and we are also grappling with it, and this is why we have our two lovely independent commissioners here as well to walk alongside us. But this is a massive piece of work, and I'm sure by the end of it, you will be a TRMP specialist. Okay, any other questions or queries in regards to this report or feedback? Or this gives us a good idea of what we are trying to achieve and the chunks of work that will fall out of it. I think as we traverse, it will become more straightforward for everyone to see what fits in where and what the timeframes are and where we are in certain processes. Just the last question before we, Yannick, with the time extensions we got for our freshwater, are we now working towards the 2027 date?
Your Worship, we are still looking to mid-26 to notify the bulk of our freshwater plans. We note that we do have an extension to 27, but we have all the rest of the TRMP to deliver as well. So set ourselves an ambitious goal, I guess, but less so because we were aiming for the end of 2024. If you rightly remember. So we have pushed it out a bit.
Fantastic. Hey, if there are no more questions in regards to this paper, it's been... Oh, there we go, Alan. Alan, you will see. You need to jump in. The floor is yours, Alan.
Sorry, I'm just working out between my hat. I have done a few plans before from start. I just wanted to check in, Joe, this, as everyone said, this will be all-consuming of the council. It'll take you over, this project. And I'm just not getting a feel for sort of the project management side of the whole project. Is there an actual plan with everything set out, what you're looking to do? I've worked a number of times with the project manager, and she always said to me, Alan, the only thing you can do wrong is not have a plan. And if you've got a plan, you know what you're doing, and you can adjust as you go along. And it'll always adjust. There's no sooner. So can you just perhaps talk us a little bit, and I know it's all about resources and those sorts of things, but there's a lot of streams we'll be working along together, and I'm just wanting to know, get a feel for what that overall plan, how it's all knitting together. Because I have found sort of heading off with regional policy statement stuff without people understanding what the rules are down on the ground a little bit. You seem sort of quite isolated, and if people can't see that, okay, we'll talk about the RPS regional policy statement now, and we're going to talk about freshwater, but we know in a couple of months' time we've got a freshwater specific thing coming along. So is there that overall program, Joe?
Your Worship, yes, there is an overall program, and the lovely Desiree is the keeper of our program plan and keeping us all to task. So there's an overarching program plan, and then within that the work streams. So each of the work streams has a lead, and they work on their own more detailed project. And then the trick is to align the three, and then also the comms and engagement side of what's happening across the different work streams and wider across council, which can be a struggle sometimes because there is a lot happening. So that there's a project plan, there's a project team, they meet regularly, we report to executive leadership monthly on progress as well. And I'm the sponsor, Charlotte's the business owner, and Desiree is our program lead, and then we have various supporting functions as well.
I'd sort of find it helpful, and maybe some of the other councillors would, is not that I don't want the detail. That's your job over there. But perhaps just one that's got a months. Yeah, what are the streams going on months over the next few years, just so that everybody's got a good understanding of what's going on. I think that would be helpful, so that when we make a comment about something, we know it'll come back to us in a few months' time. Thank you.
Such a great comment, Alan, because also we need to take into account, like all these meetings are public and live stream. And I do want to say hello to Councillor Debbie, who's online. She just texted saying she's not here, but she's listening in. Our community will hear pieces of this being reported in the media, and if they don't understand how it fits into some bigger puzzle, it might create some confusion or some criticism which is not warranted. But if we make sure everyone is aware of where that fits in, that will also be great. Awesome. No questions or queries? We all good to move the paper? Awesome. So Tairāwhiti has moved the paper. I'll second it myself. All in favour? Concrete carried. Thank you for that. Okay, I think we're just going to move straight to our next report, which is about the progress and who is going to be the boss of this. Is this going to be Drew or Charlotte? Or John? I'm just chucking it out here. Spraying.
You go, Charlotte. Go on.
Go, Charlotte.
I've spoken enough.
Go, Charlotte.
I will keep this quite brief because with the previous paper we've sort of gone through some of the high level over there. So for those that will remember, these update reports have been going to Sustainable Tairāwhiti up until this point. We try and do either quarterly, 6 monthly-ish throughout the year. So going forward, these reports will come to the so in terms of I won't go through it in full detail. We've got it set out with the different streams, where they're at, and the progress we've made since last time we checked in with you guys on it at Sustainable Tairāwhiti. And this is we've also mentioned here around phase 2, which is sort of the next part that is coming on board at some point, and I guess progress towards that. There's not any particular points you would like me to go over. I may just leave it there.
Okay, let's open it up. So, councillors, we are on page 253, and that is just the progress and where we are, and just also a summary of the budget and the risks and everything in there. Rob.
Yeah, just on page 254, it just says that the 4 advisory groups have been established, one for each of the Waimata, Pakua Catchment, Iwawa, Waipawa Catchment, and one regional group. Are we able to have a list of who are those people on those groups? Advisors and
Does those groups self-select?
So through you, Your Worship, there's a nomination process, and we set out the sort of skills and attributes that we're looking for, and then a small group within council go through the nominations, and so we get a mix that reflects the catchment, what the catchment's used for, a diverse range of views, because we don't want people who all think the same, and also people that can actually work together, because there can be some quite challenging conversations that need to be had through that catchment planning process. So they do nominate, but a nomination isn't an automatic seat.
How big are those groups?
They vary in size. Yannick, what's...
The smaller catchments, Your Worship, are around 8 to 10 people.
Okay.
The Waipawa Catchment Plan and Regional Plan advisory groups are a little bit bigger, around 15 to 20.
Okay. So there's a good spread of different interests, because we do want to make sure we have locals and people that have certain specialities in there as well.
Through you, Your Worship, all that information that goes to those catchment groups is being loaded onto our website as well, so it's made publicly available, so it isn't like some people are receiving sort of information that's then not available to the wider public. And of course, that's not the only way that we're engaging, it's a way.
Aubrey.
Thank you, Worship. Page 254 under Urban Growth and Development. So is this kind of what you were talking about, Charlotte, that the like with the Kaiti Master Plan and the City Centre Master Plan was previously a topic that we would discuss at Sustainable Tairāwhiti, and now they'll move under the TRMP?
Yes, correct.
Looking forward to reading those, thank you.
Just a mayoral question. How do we, so we're a committee and we do some work, do we update council? Where do we in to make sure all councillors are updated, or is it up to councillors to update themselves? Do we have like the odd report to council to say this is what's being done? You know, and the reason I'm asking this, the last time all councillors got an update in Sustainable Tairāwhiti, Is that going to continue to make sure we still have visibility for all of council? Because in the end of the day, councillors have the responsibility to keep themselves skilled and take part if they want to or not. But I was just wondering how that is going to work, or will all those updates now, like what Aubrey said, happen in this space? Nadine, you've got your hand up. Do you want to comment on that, or do you have a different question?
No, I want to comment on that, Your Worship. So my view on this would be that there will be high-level updates that come through the Chief Executive Report, which is what the team will feed into. That's on the 6-weekly cycle to Council. And then you do have access to everything on Docs on Tap. Councillors do have the ability to sit in on the TRMP committee if they wish to, as Councillor Taufa is. And we record these as well, so there are many opportunities to get the updates alongside what goes in the CE report, and there might be cross-references to some items or agenda matters in the Sustainable Tairāwhiti Committee in addition to that. So plenty of opportunity to get up to speed, and you can also reach out and ask questions of the Director or myself.
Awesome, thank you for that. Sarah.
Relevant comment and very important, the full council will have to adopt the TRMP. So as a comms message, it is incumbent on all councillors to understand the significance of the matters they're deliberating on, so they will need to keep up to speed.
So true, because in the end of the day, we will make a recommendation for council to adopt. So councillors who are listening online, I'm speaking to the converted, but please make sure we do stay on top of this, because you definitely don't want 500 pages worth of technical reports being dumped on you and you have no idea what's going on. But I do want to give a bouquet to our team. Even through all the cyclone stuff last year and earlier this year, we have received updates on where we are at and different pieces of work. So there's absolutely no excuse for councillors not to be across that. Larry.
Yeah, I've just got a question just on page 254, and it's just I'd just like some clarification a little bit on just a sentence at the bottom of page 254. Other changes are likely to include plan content for Papakainga in the urban zones, heritage structure amendments, and updates to subdivision and development content. Heritage structure amendments, is that part of what we've proposed for the government for our CBD with with buildings in there, or could I just have what is that?
So through you, Your Worship, that encompasses reviewing our existing historic heritage schedules that are contained in the existing plan and the rules and policies that apply to them. So as part of that work, some of that could be looking at how you enable reuse of historic heritage buildings, for example, the level of protection that you do or don't provide within the plan, remembering sort of the need to be consistent with the RMA.
Yeah.
There will be limits as to how far you can go within a resource management plan in terms of making people.
Yeah. Well, we've just put a remit to the government about some of our buildings in town, and so if they come back and give us an extra tool at a later date, so we will be able to change this to give us more clout to be able to buildings.
Thank you, Your Chair. It depends on which bits they change. So if they, as part of perhaps responding to our request, if they do some parts in the Resource Management Act, that may give us more tools in this space. If they give us more tools or levers in the Building Act space, then that would come under that kind of area, and they're able to do a number of things that sit outside of the TRMP through that particular act and the enforcement powers they have through that.
So all those different acts are going to be under this scope, Building Act. And
Through you, Your Worship, when we're looking at how to achieve an objective, for example, a resource management objective, we look at all the different tools available and we sort of decide, is putting something in our resource management plan the best way to achieve that objective, or are there other ways that it can be achieved? So we don't need to focus so much in the TRMP. So that's something that's looked at and considered through the planning process. and our issues and options really.
You can just see we've got a huge maze of all these interconnecting plans and policies that we've done in the
Absolutely.
past, and if we don't kind of keep an eye on all of them, there's some going to come back to bite us big time. Yeah, right.
Josh and then Colin.
It also, the other side of that too, from staff is that we would, as a council, we submit to what those tools should look like, right, in order to be able to find something that's sensible for delivery. But also, aside from that, we also submit on things that are aligned to our regional priorities, like with forestry, we're submitting to the NPS for forestry and stuff. That's correct, right? Correct statement there too. So just that other side of that as well. I did just want to really just point out again, a lot of my things I already know, but I'm just trying to we have a team here of you people, so I'm kind of just putting these things out there just for other people to consider. But on page 268 under 83, there are some things in there that have been changed nationally. I just want to highlight that in D, that under the current plans that are being changed, we have to align our consenting pathway for coal mining alongside with the other pathways of mining inside of those specific national policy statements of Indigenous biodiversity, environmental standards for fresh water, right? So a lot of this stuff filters from national to us in order to have to do, and again, this is part of the journey that we take our community on, is that the community can take that one thing there and go, you as a council are supporting coal mining in this region, but actually the things that we're doing in region can't conflict with the things that are going up. So again, it's about that mobility question that I'd asked before. So it's really quite complex, and it's riddled with lots of things that we end up taking hits for as councillors, just to kind of put it out there as well.
And I do want to assure councillors, we have a very smart team working for us, because often when I am in Wellington and we might talk about changes that are proposed or feedback, say on the emergency roading, often some of the officials working in Wellington are specifically waiting for feedback, what type of submission we and our team, because we are so unique and we often are the outlier or often the exception in the rule. So it's not like our staff are sitting under a rock waiting for legislation or the RMA to change. They are also actively involved in their day-to-day jobs with giving feedback and working on that. So we are very lucky to have a crew on top of this who are really connected nationally as well. Colin, you had a question.
Yeah, made a few notes. Let's cover them now, I think.
Thank you.
A declaration of interest. I am a TRI dweller, and I'd like to kotuku, my new word.
Kotuku. We'll get there, Colin.
Rawania's comments about the different catchments, and the TRI is such a different catchment to the Waipawa that it really does require its own set of notes. And these catchment groups can be contacted directly, so I guess it isn't an issue, but comms can go directly to each of those. So we're just bring that up again. A couple of comments, page 263, the Te Mana Te Wai review. Just wondering when we might get to have a look at that, point 46. So that looks like it's already down the track a bit.
263. 263, page 40.
Page 263, note 46.
Yeah.
It sounds like some work's being done on this. I'm just wondering at what point we'll get to see that. I guess the sooner the better is what I'm saying. Any quick answer?
Yannick, thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, a very quick answer. I'm assuming that it refers to the work that was done by Poipoia. That was last year. We should make that publicly available. And we're looking to work on top of that as a platform. We're considering, I guess, what we've been calling the golden thread. Now, this is a really important component of Mana o Te Wai, which is how do we know that we've given effect to Mana o Te Wai through our plans? There's two components to it. There's an engagement component where we develop a relationship with mana whenua and our communities. And then there is the hierarchy of obligations where we have to consider the prioritisation against the health of the way itself, human health and all other uses. And it's incumbent on us to consider how we can justify. And so we're using that technical report as a platform to further our own understanding of how we can give effect to this. And I think it's a very useful approach to bed into our Section 32 reports, which is a justification approach, evaluation. So that's what we're working on into the future as well. But short answer is we can provide that report for you.
Good, thank you. I think that's been a good grow with it. That's good. And my next comment was on page 261, 31, procurement of professional services. And I realise this is a separate budget, but always looking to cut costs. And you know, are we looking at sourcing local where possible? And this tree question, for example, the likes of Eastwood Hill and the Tree Growers Association and outfits like that help to contribute to this rather than going straight to a professional who's going to demand a check. Just a comment, thank you.
Thank you for that comment, and we would hope, and we do know that we have specific procurement policies which are very professional and focused, so that staff would stick to those, but also when expertise are needed. Like if I need a heart transplant, I do not want my dentist doing that. So at the end of the day, we would hope that staff would have the appropriate level of expertise to complement whatever we are looking for in the plan. Any last comments? Oh, lots of comments. Alan, here we go.
Sorry, there's a number of these questions are coming in pretty cold. So there's a lot of things I don't know. I was just looking at the work of the Maori representative team, and my question is then leading to, at the end of when you prepare a draft of this whole plan, it then has to go to iwi for them to comment on, and the council has to have particular regard to those comments. So you do consultation, and then there's a specific statutory stage where iwi. So I'm just, in other plans I've been involved in, we've set up in Christchurch, it was the Runaka working group, and Waikato was the same, Nelson was the same. And that group worked all the way through. And so when it came to that end time, the issues that were outstanding had all been talked through, and there was an understanding that, yep, they didn't agree, and that was going to be a submission point, but they were happy for that to go off into the process. So I just want to get a bit more of an understanding of how that's rolling along. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alan. Jean, would I be able to pass over to you? So Jean is in charge of our Māori responsiveness team, and can you talk a little bit about how that is looking in our space, Jean?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, and thank you for your question. It's certainly a labour of love, and I'm sure through your Canterbury and Waikato examples, you would have experienced some of the challenges and the opportunities, particularly when it relates to council working in a way that is meaningful with our treaty partners, particularly when it comes to statutory kaupapa and the likes of a plan review at this scale. So you've heard examples this morning already of efforts that council have made, and actually a standard we set for ourselves was to actually try and co-draft and co-design, I guess, with tangata whenua partners through efforts like iwi technical trial and the likes. So, and you'll also be aware of the, I guess, open invitation still to iwi representatives to participate and partake in this committee itself as well. So the building blocks are certainly there, and we can only work as capability, capacity allows, and the depth and the detail of that capability and capacity when it comes to our partners. We are still always across the various streams, RPS, FDS, in this iterative relationship and we have sort of notification processes at key milestones with our statutory acknowledged relationships and requirements, but then also too we must consider the whānau hapu marae level and their opportunity to contribute to these different streams within the TRMP as well. So we are certainly attempting to facilitate and create spaces where we're sort of co-designing, co-creating where possible, alongside our iwi relationships, and then also too trying to take wider engagement where possible, where applicable, on TRMP stream kaupapa out to region. Obviously Freshwater sort of leading the charge in terms of the TRMP program around marae-based, hapu-based, community-based discussion. But certainly it is a factor for us, and something that we're actually looking to reconfigure at the moment, given the breadth of kaupapa that we're also navigating as well. And when you try and take planning speak to, I guess, tangata whenua relationships, and it's been discussed in this meeting already this morning, we're really not trying to, we're looking at a way of coordinating ourselves where we don't push our siloed approaches or our streamed approaches to the plan review process onto tangata whenua, and we're just talking about at the moment with a bit of a reset at the beginning of the year, how we bundle up our approach in a way where we are, I guess, giving tangata whenua the best opportunity that we can, our iwi partners the best opportunity that we can, to sit down and contribute to this plan-making process in a way where it suits the current capacity and capability challenges in some examples. So certainly making efforts. It's a matter of working with the willing and the available when those opportunities arise, but we're certainly trying and looking to a bit of a reset in terms of our programmed approach, and taking a bit more of a holistic view out rather than consulting on an RPS or attempting to work in partnership on an RPS.
Thank you for that, Jean. Any last questions or queries before?
I've just got something I should have done earlier, and Colin just reminded me, actually, I've got a vested interest in our CBD. I'd just like to clear an interest there with as a building owner. So I think right from the start I should have done that right, so I apologise.
Yeah, just, this may sound a little bit simplistic, so excuse me for that, but I think the reason that we're even here having this conversation and reviewing this plan is because there's been frustrations over the years with it and the way it's worked, and the barriers have been put up in front of people, and we've got changes being made to it from government their way, looking at trying to address some of this stuff. So as part of this, are we going to be really looking, sometimes I find it's easier to look at the problem and work backwards rather than trying to create something from the start and ending up at the end and people go, well, we've got a plan, but did we actually address the problems we got? So I'm wondering how much emphasis is actually going to go into addressing the frustrations with the current RMP in this district, specific to our district, and then working back from that about trying to address those and then working out how they then fit into the plan? Is that part of the process? Or?
For you, Worship, absolutely. It's a mix of the starting from the top but also from the bottom as well, and we work closely. Our consents team, for example, have a very good idea of where the frustrations are because they hear them from the community all the time, and they deal with it themselves in terms of working with a plan that doesn't reflect the current status, if you like. Some bits of our plan are quite old. So it's a mix of working from the bottom up, where are the problems, where are the pain points, and from the top down, where do we want to get to, what's the strategic direction.
So we attack it from all sides.
Yeah, and the middle.
Josh.
Can I just make a point though? Our review of the TRMP is because there were problems with our review of the TRMP is because it's old and it's stale, and it was written for a time period where it was applicable, but we have had to review it in order to make it applicable for now. So it hasn't been like a problem-based reason to go into it. It's been a process. This is part of our role as a council to have a plan that our community can utilise and can last us for the next chunk of time for that council to start thinking about what that would that plan would be to update for whatever Gisborne looks like in 50, 70 years time, whenever the review period is. So just to kind of put that out there too, it was part of our obligations to actually refresh and renew this.
Sarah.
Worship. Total kōrua, both points, understanding the rationale for change and acknowledging the state of flux that everyone's in. My question comes from an acknowledgement that plan monitoring across the country is piecemeal at best. Other types of monitoring arguably better, but plan monitoring, I'm really interested in the data and evidence from the existing TRMP that's informing the review. But then as you're thinking about the strategic direction, the measures and the monitoring approaches that you're going to put in place to track progress towards your strategic objectives. And when you're resource constrained, you don't want to be doing whole plan reviews constantly. You could get more agility building a really responsive monitoring regime. And sorry, that was a bit of a soapbox. But the question is, data and evidence underpinning this review, and what are you thinking about in that context moving forward?
So through you, Your Worship, you have highlighted a real challenge for us in terms of plan monitoring. So we are pretty good in terms of the natural environment, freshwater in particular. We've really built up our evidence base there. Starting to build on our coastal program, we have air quality monitoring, but those other aspects are harder to track, and our current plan doesn't really set us up for a workable plan monitoring program. So that needs to be really thought about when we develop those parts of this new plan, is what are we monitoring and how, and are we actually resourced to deliver it? And there has been a lot of technical work commissioned over the last 2 to 3 years to support the plan review, because we went through an exercise of identifying where we had gaps, and we've been filling those on a prioritised basis. For example, we've had work done on outstanding natural features and landscapes, for example, and natural character, because we hadn't had that updated since it was originally done back in the mid-90s, I think. Yeah.
Great question. Thank you for that. Any other questions or queries before we break for a little cup of tea? Is someone willing to move the paper? Oh, it's just a noting paper, page 25. Thank you, Aubrey. Moved by Aubrey, seconded by Josh. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Let's break for 15 minutes, bathroom break, have a cup of tea, and then we'll come back at 10:30 and we'll start at the front of our report and work through. Kapai. Thank you. Thank you to everyone online. We'll be back in 15 minutes. And either you are turning off the microphone so they don't listen to us. Hand over to you to talk a little bit about just our overarching policy framework, because at the end of the day, that is where everything in this region is going to hang off on. So it is so important for us to make sure that is very clear and aligned with what our community need and want. So I'm going to hand over to you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. So this report seeks agreement in principle in terms of an overarching policy framework for the what these provisions might look like, and this will also be down the list of the TRMP as we go through the review. When considering the overarching policy framework, I guess we're asking, what do we want to focus our policy on? Do we want to focus on the environment first, and provide a bit of a hierarchy? Do we want to recognise the relationships between environments, which doesn't really have a hierarchy, and or do we want to provide trade-offs between the different environments? The report identifies 6 potential frameworks. So we've got the Tairāwhiti, which basically provides a hierarchy similar to that in O2Y sectors. A bit broader in freshwater, that recognises other environments. So land, coastal as well. Katai, recognising the interconnectedness, interactions, and considers the environment as a whole, but doesn't necessarily provide a hierarchy within it. Future development strategy objective, which is something that's recently been canvassed with council. This is quite narrow focus to urban development, not necessarily the wider environment. And then sustainable management, which has basically been around since the inception of the RMA, so it's got a good few years behind it. In absence of uncertain outcomes, plan provisions can have unpredictable outcomes within applying sustainable management. So the recommendation has been around applying both Te Taio, which prioritises the needs of the environment, and Karakia, which recognises the interconnectedness from mountains to the sea as the overarching policy approach. So once we've got an idea of what this framework looks like, we can then use this to refine the strategic direction and create management chapters, which at the moment are framed quite broadly, and we need to somehow narrow that down and be a bit more concise. We would, I guess, as discussions on this framework progress throughout the review, it may also evolve, so just be aware of that. It's something just to help the initial drafting at this stage.
And we can change or pivot with those until we notify the plan. So that while it's in draft stage, we can see, oh, maybe we need to go a little bit that way or a little bit this way, or our community or our iwi partners might say, I want you to look more at this. So we can play around with those until we decide to notify. Thank you for that, Paula. So we have the whole report, and I thought it might be worthwhile if people wanted to discuss the 6 options that there are at this stage. So that is page 8, 9, 10, 11. Just talk about the different options, and then the preferred option if anyone fundamentally disagreed with option 4, which is apply both Te Taio and Karakia, the preferred option. Please feel free to speak up, or if you want to support it, or if you're happy with the recommendation, that's ka pai. But I do want to just create a space if anyone wanted to discuss those options. Aubrey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, thank you for the report. And I had mentioned earlier that I've got quite a few questions around consistency of languaging and all of that sort of stuff. But I think we've got a really unique opportunity on this TRMP committee to make some amazing recommendations to council, and I believe some transformative changes on how we respect and implement and use and utilise our natural resources. And I just want to encourage all of us in this space to open our minds to encompassing some more holistic te ao Māori worldviews in this perspective. So just one, it was the recommendation. I really don't understand the difference between Karakia and Te Taio, because as I read through the report, it says Te Taio covers this, this and this. And then when I went back to Karakia, the intentions that Ngāi Tahu set it up and how it's been implemented across all of their councils, fisheries, and all of those, and all of their strategic papers, it contains in there all the things that we've listed underneath Te Taio. So for me, when I read them and I go to the examples, they are one and the same document. And I suppose when the recommendation says that benefits, there were pros and cons, and that the cons was that by combining Karakia and Te Taio, it's not a proven format, so there will be a level of risk involved. Whereas if we went with the single Karakia, which I really do believe all of the aspects are contained from Te Taio within Karakia, like kaitiakitanga, like special things around specifically water. Because I think I understand that they're read as a document, but the intention which Ngāi Tahu implemented the paper is there's so much more that encompasses that, and that is reflected when you read the Southland District Council, the Environmental Canterbury, the Ngāi Tahu Fisheries, I think I read the Kaikoura Runanga. When you read how they have implemented Ki Utiki Tai into their paperwork, it encompasses all the things Te Taiao, it's telling us in this report that Te Taiao we're using to compensate for something that isn't in Ki Utiki Tai, but I believe it's actually there. So can we?
I might just defer to Yvonne, if that's okay, Yvonne.
Thank you for that very good, thorough explanation about your thoughts on that. It is, with all of these terms, they're used by different people at different times, and I think one of the most important things is that we explain what we mean by these terms. And so Ki Utiki Tai sometimes doesn't place any priority in terms of one resource over the other. So where you have a use of one that might impact on another resource, it doesn't tell you what the priority might be. So an example might be where urban growth might increase the demand on water, and that has an effect, what is the priority? And so that's where the distinction really comes, and they are very fine distinctions. They are very similar concepts. I think Ki Utiki Tai is one, the way you have explained it, we could express that thinking as what that means to Gisborne, and it would cover it all. What we're looking for is the ability to discuss with people about what it means for Gisborne, and then to work that up into a statement that we can use in the plan drafting.
Can I ask a question while you think of your question? So what you just said, Yvonne, did you say that the one option gives us hierarchical priorities where the other doesn't? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, so Te Taiao comes from the replacement legislation for the RMA, so we've just slightly renamed it because that legislation was repealed and there are some difficulties about using that framework. So that is very clear and specific that the well-being of the environment's put first. Ki Utiki Tai doesn't actually say that. It could. We could write it that way, but it doesn't actually say that. So that's why the recommendation is that we combine those two thinking so that there's a clear expression that the health and well-being of the environment is put first, and we recognise the interconnected relationship of resources and the relationship that occurs when we're managing those resources is expressly stated that we're putting environmental outcomes first. There are other ways of managing resources that we can also explore, but if the preference of council is to put an emphasis on outcomes on the health and well-being of the environment, then that's helpful for us to know when we start to talk to people about how the plan works.
Are you saying that we can't, in our version, in our interpretation of Ki Utiki Tai, for the purposes of the TRMP, we can't do what you've just said is present in Te Taiao?
So through you, Your Worship, we can. We need that direction.
Because I suppose there is a difference in the, in explicit language just for example, Te Runanga o Kaikohe wrote that in theirs, and their explanation of Ki Uta Ki Tai is based on the idea that if the realms of Tāwhiti Mātia, wind, Tāne, forest, Papatuanuku whenua, and Tangaroa the sea are sustained, then the people will be sustained. The kaupapa reflects the knowledge that resources are connected from the mountains to the sea and must be managed as such. So after reading those interpretations, for me, it does put social, cultural, social, economic well-beings second to the environment. That I thought maybe was a slightly different, because I felt like in Te Taio actually it kind of gave me, because I don't fully understand it, that it was similar, that the values of cultural, social and economic well-being was held in a similar level of regard to the cultural, to the well-being of environmental resources. Is that a...
Yeah, through your worship, I understand what you're saying. So yes, I think it's about being clear what do we mean, and what do we want to base that principle of our plan about. Is it about that the natural environment underpins everything and that there is an interconnectedness that we need to be aware of, or is it something else? Essentially, and then we can figure out what we call it and how we describe it as we get, in more detail.
Okay.
We'll come back. Okay.
No, I've got a couple more questions.
Don't hold back. This is your time.
Okay. Just on page 16, under SRMR 14, Prosperous Tairāwhiti, bullet point 3. Does not compromise existing and future productive activities and use of land or regionally significant infrastructure. And I suppose this question aligns with my other question about the weighting of environmental versus social, cultural, economic. So in this statement, we are saying that those things have the possibility of taking precedence over the environment. Like there's no explicit, if it was said with that line, including, given that those particular activities would not adversely affect the health and well-being of the environment.
Through your worship, yes, and these are some of the things that we are going to be grappling with as we go through this. So we may have a principle that guides our plan making, but then there'll come a point possibly when you as a group are thinking, but we need this regionally significant infrastructure or we are no longer going to function as a region. And that may have an adverse effect on a natural environment value. How are we going to manage that? How are we going to reconcile that tension? And that's why this is so hard and so important.
On page 19, just languaging, te oranga o te taia. In our 3-year plan, our languaging is oranga whenua, oranga wai. So, and for me, when you're looking at the true intention of oranga wai, oranga whenua, it's about the protection, restoration and revitalisation of the health and well-being of waterways and lands, which includes biosecurity, it includes all of the things that that line says, but it aligns with our current languaging that we're using within the council. And then on page, I'm just trying to find my notes. No, we'll talk about that one. We'll talk about Ki Uta Ki Tai and policies on page 39. So there's a few policies in there that have, you can tell, are taken directly from the Ngāi Tahu document. Point 2, mō tātou mō ka uri a muri ake nei, which is a dialect specific to Ngāi Tahu, so it's not our language.
To be successfully integrated and actioned here into Tairāwhiti, this document needs to reflect our languaging. For example, instead of ko te tae o te mea nui, oranga wai, oranga whenua. Possibly instead of mō tātou a mō ka uri a muri ake nei, oranga tangata, oranga mō te āpopo. This also gives us consistency by weaving, now it's gone.
No rush.
By weaving the foundation values Council has identified into the committees which support those identified values, goals and objectives, integrating kaupapa across Council. And last but not least, page 40, I feel like I'm taking up everything.
No, there's more than enough
Get in
time.
there first.
On page 40, yes, under freshwater. When using mana of the whenua, so under freshwater, point 1, the mana of the whenua and the mauri of the waterways in Te Tairāwhiti is restored. The issue I have, and Jean might like to weigh in on this, is that mauri and mana is not something that can be restored because it's not something that can be taken away. Mauri and mana exists. It's definitely a spiritual thing, and it is not something that, for example, there's myself and there's possibly one of our homeless whānau out there in the CBD. We still carry equal mauri and equal mana. Though a waterway like Kopua Whakapata is full of E. coli and the Mōtū catchment, because of the tributaries and the surrounding environment, they still both have mana. There is a waterways down here at Waikanai that hasn't got a name. Even without a name, it still has a mana and a mauri. So that's why I'm saying when we say that we will restore the mana of the whenua and the mauri of the waterways, how can we restore something that hasn't been taken away? That it would be more appropriate if we used our languaging, and if we said oranga whenua, oranga wai, we will work towards the revitalisation and restoration of the health and well-being of the land and of the water.
Thank you for that. All good.
I have one more, sorry.
Good, no worries.
Yes. This one. It's on page 42. Decision-making and processes. Aitiakitanga, it's this third bullet point, is recognise and mana whenua actively participate. I'd be really interested to know what mechanisms are we going to try and put in place to ensure the success of that particular statement. That's going to be real interesting how we do that. And the bullet underneath it integrates te ao Māori and mātauranga Māori into the management and monitoring of natural and physical resources. Is there any ideas about how we're going to achieve that?
Should I ask the Honourable Jean Takurua?
Kia ora tātou. Now, I'm acutely aware that Rawini and Councillor Parata aroha mai and Nadine had their hands up before. Am I still okay just to feedback quickly? Tika tau, Councillor Ria, pai e nei pātai, kia ata wete hia me ki te ngako o wēnei kōrero. And what I'm saying here is just great questions from Councillor Ria, because actually what we're starting to do is to critically reflect on our own use, our way of working, the expectations that we raise through public processes and documents like this, versus what that actually means in our ability to, I guess, deliver in the fashion that we said that we're going to. So to the two bullet points, that you've mentioned. Firstly, kaitiakitanga is recognised and mana whenua actively participate. There are examples of that happening. I think when we refer specifically to the current relationship between iwi entity leadership and council, that conversation might be very, very different. However, I think in the marae hapu level led discussions, I think particularly through the freshwater program, not necessarily the TRMP as a whole, and that's why I value the depth of this discussion, because it's really tabling, I guess, the wider implications and I guess effects that potentially do or don't occur when we are using language and again not walking that talk, so to speak. So definitely within the freshwater program, kaitiakitanga and mana whenua actively participating is something certainly that's being facilitated, and the integration of te ao Māori and mātauranga Māori, huge task. Again, I refer back to the iwi technical trial as a pilot for us and our iwi entities to start to work together and understand what that looks like. As Joe's highlighted, we're attempting to pivot within that pilot program, what we've learnt from that last year. And as Joe's highlighted, there are iwi have chosen different ways, I guess, to utilise their capacity in the relationship between council to apply their energy where they best see fit, and that is through the expression, as Joe's highlighted, iwi environmental management plans and the likes. But certainly something that needs to be discussed, and I value the light that's been shone on it today and in the fashion that you have, because again it prompts some really good discussion following this between us as internal staff to figure out how we respond in the appropriate manner.
Ngā mihi, Jean. And just finally, it's not a question, it's just a awhi for all of us. It's te tai ao.
Te tai ao.
Yeah, not or.
Te tai ao.
Ao.
Ao. Thank you for that. Okay, Rawinia and then Nadine, thank you.
You want to go first, Nadine? Because I assume that your thing is about what has just been spoken about.
You're muted, Nadine.
You're on mute.
Rookie move. Through your worship, just following on from what Jean was saying, and I think this goes back to the very first comment that Councillor Thea made about framing basically in language use and the consistency in it and how we're applying it to these documents, and also the frame of reference within which we are kind of coming from, and there's a wealth of knowledge around the table, and and that we can draw on in this space. So, and I think it's a really good kōrero that just happened, and the points that you raised, Councillor. And so I'm wondering, in terms of progressing this forward, if there's an opportunity to facilitate and ensure appropriate cultural context in these documents or in these plans that we're making, through how we have done before. I think it might have been when we were looking at the values and the wording and the positioning around that we have a smaller group just kind of really flesh this out a bit more, so that we're getting the cultural context and the framing right for our place.
Oh, hi, that sounds like a plan. Rawinia.
Hi, tēnā tātou. Just want to support some of the things that have already been discussed, but I won't labour the point. I think it's awesome that as a council we're starting to talk about what terms mean and how we mean them and how we want them to look in our documents. I feel like this leaps ahead of where the country is, that we really want to understand what it is that we're saying, and the use of bilingual terms. I think that's really important. So like, tap yourself on the shoulder and feel good about that, even though we're not quite got it perfectly. Okay, my points. Let's go. I'm going to do my notes backwards. So on page 28, I wonder if that's the right word, enabling iwi to contribute to consent decisions. I have a funny reaction to the word enable, where iwi and mana whenua are, are involved. Like, do we say we enable whānau Pākehā to participate? It sort of makes me feel funny. I wonder if what we're doing instead is removing barriers, or efficiently supporting, or something along those lines. It's not for us to enable iwi to participate, but it is for us to try and make it easy for them to do so. So I don't know if anyone else feels that way, or I just kind of don't love that language. Where am I? Supporting urban areas. What's my note? Oh, I just really wanted to commend on page 27. It's IM016, supporting urban areas. Our urban areas include rural townships are developed within keeping of their character, supported by sustainable infrastructure and services to deliver long-term social economic resilience. I just think that's a really awesome outcome to have. When I think about te taiao and the environment, I personally struggle because those are not one of the things that I am super passionate about. I'm super passionate about whānau and about how we live and play in this region. And whilst I understand that this is about balancing our need to protect the environment, our waters, our whenua, I feel like there's a part here missing about what protecting those elements mean for our people, for our whānau, how it is that when we do those things, when we put those systems in place, it benefits us. How does it benefit us? And sometimes when I read these documents, that piece is missing for me, and sometimes I find it hard to connect, even though it embarrasses me to say that, just protecting whenua is not enough for me. I need to know, I need to feel, how does that affect my mokopuna that have not yet been born? Make sense? Can't really see everyone's faces in the room, but I hope that it's got a engaged audience. On page 26, it is IM06, maintaining the health of the natural environment. The health of the natural environment maintained or improved. Mostly because I believe that the Gisborne District Council in Tairāwhiti as a region is so bold in our way. I would prefer that the statements say the health of the health of the natural environment is improved. Full stop. Because maintained where it is currently is no good. We don't want it not as bad, and where it is now we want it to be improved. So I prefer that even if we can't quite reach it, that we aspire to improve it. Aubrey had so many points, so I'm just going to keep going.
Good. All good.
Come on. And also on page 26, IM01, strong partnership between iwi and council. I think it's an important relationship to have, and I think it's important that it's outlined. However, I don't know if what we mean is iwi or we mean mana whenua. Sometimes it is iwi, but it isn't always iwi. Sometimes it's hapu, and part of our journey has been and continues to be who is the right people to engage in what space. Sometimes it is iwi, but we've learned along the way it is not always iwi. And I wonder if we should just adjust that word to be mana whenua, which opens us up to the possibility of having that discussion about figuring out who's the right person. Okay. Oh, no, that's all right. Yeah, just going off what Aubrey was saying about the Māori, the Māori of a place, that we cannot enhance Māori, but I do think that we can protect it, and I do think that there's a space there of acknowledging. You can acknowledge Māori, you can protect it, you can care for it, and I think we're on the right track with the use of the kupu with what we think is what we want to say. I think it's just a matter of framing it more strongly in Te Ao Māori, and I would really encourage Jean to have more to do with the development of these concepts, because it might be that there are other kupu that could help us demonstrate what it is that we're trying to say, because I can see it, that what we're saying is we want to look after the special taonga and the life force and its essence. Not sure if Māori is the right word for it, but often it's the kupu around it that's the issue. That you can't restore Māori, but you can protect it, you can care for it, you can look after it, you can give it space. So yeah, we just really encourage the use of our council experts around cultural tikanga te reo Māori to develop that, so it's so strong that when we present to our iwi partners, we can do so confidently in a shared model of understanding. That's me. I don't know if somebody else moved it, but I can move it.
Thank you for that feedback, Rawinia. I'll just open for, I'm just looking at our clock, which says 5 minutes past 11. There will be no rush. I'm just letting everyone know if we do carry on, Josh will take over from me and I will vamoose out of here at 12. So I'm not trying to rush anyone. And so we're going to open this. Thank you for moving that paper, Rawinia. We're just going to allow for comment and feedback and just discussions around this paper. Thank you. Rob, thank you.
Yeah, look, I just find this a little bit rushed, personally. This is a recommendation. We're making a recommendation here. And I find this a little bit rushed because, following on from what Rawinia has sort of just said, is and probably going back to what I said before around what are the problems that we're trying to address here and what are we trying to fix and what are we trying to make easier for our district. This almost to me is putting something out there that is actually going to make it even harder to do than what we are currently doing. So I really, really struggle with the economic side of this equation not being part of this direction, because if we want to do a whole lot of stuff, we want to fix our environment, then we have to be able to pay for it somehow. And I just don't see the link here. I think we're actually setting ourselves up on a path that we're going to get to the end of this thing and we're going to go, oh my God, we're here, but how do we fix this problem? So I'm not in favour of recommending it at this stage, because I think.
Thank you. Anyone wants to comment on that? Where it's raised that there's no clear economic lever in here, but I think that overarching is more about the environment and what we have.
Through you, Your Worship, I think sustainable management covers those four well-being, so economic has to be considered as part of the plan making. What we're talking about here is the overarching principle, but as I mentioned earlier, when you get down to more of the detailed provisions, you will need to make some choices about, well, yes, in general, the concept is putting the environment first, if that's what you decide. I don't know what you're going to decide, but there may be times where you say, but in this particular instance, or for these particular set of circumstances, there needs to be a slightly different approach, a more nuanced approach. I guess what the team is looking for here is a steer on whether putting the natural environment first is an overarching guiding principle or not. And then we'll come back with what that means and the implications of doing that and where you need to sort of fine-tune that approach given in particular circumstances, because you're right, we do need to have an economy. We can't disregard that, and that's not what the RMA is all about either. I know it's quite hard to think in the abstract because this is at quite an abstract level that we're thinking. And as we go through, at each point we have to test the costs and benefits of a proposal rolling out.
Yeah, I've got similar concerns as well. I mean, at the end of the day, the ultimate is the well-being of the community, the well-being of the people. That's the priority. And most of the time that comes from, as we know, protecting the environment and all the ecosystems that are applicable to it. We're going through major land changes at the moment, land use changes, and those, even for instance, taking out forestry is just affecting huge amounts of the community with employment options and all sorts of different things. And by putting in native and reversion in its place, I mean, we've got, there's all these different economic benefits that we've got to look at that's possible from that, and it all comes back to the people, so the communities. I think we've got to work on a par. Everyone's got to, the environment is, we've got to work to the environment, but the environment's got to work to the community. It should be on a par. I think we're going to be heading in a very difficult position if we start prioritising. Myself.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask Nadine to comment. If you think I'm texting or on Facebook, I'm communicating with the people online and lining them up. Nadine.
Through your worship, I wasn't going to respond in particular to Councillor Foster's comment or perspective in terms of the place of the economy around the framework. What I was going to ask was, and I think Councillor Parata, did you move that recommendation? Because I was just checking in around the comments that were stated around the use of te reo in this context, and the use of te taiao and ki uta ki tai, which are both outlined in that recommendation, and whether there needed to be an amendment to capture that we were going to do a bit more work to make sure that that framing really reflects our intent within this context of te Tairāwhiti. And if that were the case, then I would suggest we would be dropping out the te reo Māori words in there until we've come back with an agreed kind of way forward.
Yeah, can that be done?
I got a nod from.
Yes,
I got
sorry.
a nod. Yes.
Okay.
Josh.
Thank you, Worship. I want to state for the record that we're talking about a plan that is empowered underneath the Resource Management Act, which is reportable to the Ministry for the Environment. The whole point of having an RMA is to sustainably manage our environment in order to meet the well-being needs of our people and economy and things like that. That's the whole point of the RMA. It's the whole point of our plans and things like regional policy statements, is to manage our environment in relation to all of those other things that we need to do. It doesn't mean that if we focus on the environment, that means we're not going to be building roads and we're not going to be building houses and things like that. It's how do we do that in a way that still honours our environment, not as a block to our environment. The things that our community are facing in regards to blocks aren't because we've prioritised environment, it's because we have old planning instruments that says, no, you can't build this very sensible house over here because it's designated this, even though there are already houses in that place. Those are the functional parts out of the frustrations of our community, not that we prioritise environment. I'm 100% in support of the overarching approach to this policy framework actually being focused on te taiao, even if we still use the languaging of ki uta ki tai, because from a strategic kind of overarching visionary perspective, from inland to shore is a great concept when we're thinking about Tairāwhiti and how we want to manage this under a resource management plan. So I did just want to focus us in regards to that, because it does sound like that the kōrero is siloed against economies over here and versus environment versus people. Well, it's actually not. The RMA is about sustainable management of our environment, and we can't have people. We can't have people without environment. And we can't have economy without people. So so it's, in terms of hierarchy, it makes complete sense in order to support the recommendations. Also considering what the CE had just said and the feedback that Councillor Rea had just given. So that's my very informed opinion in regards to this kaupapa as an elected member. Well, one thing that I do want to bring up as an aside to that is that I really like the feedback that Councillor Rea gave in regards to that other document that's further down. And I also do just want to note that at the bottom of that, it's one of the attachments here. It's attachment.
Which one are you looking for?
Oh, the working draft, the strategic direction.
Page 38.
Yeah, so page 38, because that's a working draft. It's not currently council policy. It would be great if the things that Councillor Rea shared here today able to be just implemented or just noted and put into that working draft. It's very sensible, very logical stuff that you shared, and because that's not confirmed and it's still a working draft, it'd be great to have those things implemented. So I'm happy where we go with the priority being environment in regards to the TRMP.
Well, if we just grab an example which is front of mind for all of us would be the over-allocation of the Waipawa. There will be no economic activity if we do not look at the quality and the quantity of that water source first. If we allocate or say we prioritise economic development and we just hand out more permits and we allow a development on the flats without first thinking the water that sustain that industry, that do pay the bills and look after industry, if we do not prioritise the water first, that will die. So to me it is intertwined, but in the end of the day, if we choke the environment, nothing will happen. And it's that balancing act. It is not so much one instead of the other, but the environment sustain it all. So that's how I look at it very simplistically, is if we just use that example, which is front of mind to all of us and have been for a good, 10 years?
On top of that then, if you look at how can you remedy that, and we've got AUD, we've got a managed aquifer recharge program that also has got to fit into that equation, because that's all about managing water, and water is not necessarily just coming from a river, it's coming from now in modern life, coming from other sources as well. So there's all these different other elements that should come into it, because why would you put semi-fresh water out into the ocean every day when it could be reused into something that could help alleviate our water shortage problem? I'll just put that out there.
Alan.
Please don't think I'm being critical. I think the korero that we had from Councillor Aubrey over there was very helpful, I think. And I think it's probably helpful for someone like myself coming in, and I read these things and I go, okay, what does this tell me about Tairāwhiti? And I get through 10 strategic objectives. One's got 10 parts to it. There's 48 policies in there. Then I get to the integrated management bit, and there's 24 objectives and 23 policies. And I get to the end of all that, and I have no idea what this means for Tairāwhiti. I think the concepts that you've got in terms of those overriding ways you're going to look, mountains and sea, exactly what you should do. Very logical, very sensible for a place like here. What it's missing then is, what does it mean as you go from the mountains to the sea? What are the policies that you're going to engage at a strategic level? Where are they? How do they work? And I'm thinking, with the approach you take to your freshwater, when you're looking at catchments, you go through the catchments, top to bottom, work out all the values and the things that are, and you actually paint a picture of what the catchment is. So that when you get to the end of that table of the values of and you can go, oh, okay, that's what's happening in that catchment. I've got a good idea. Here, I don't get any idea of what is happening, which are the more important policies at different parts of the district. So that helps you over those things where you're saying, yep, the environment's very important, and the important part of our urban environment is amenity, clean air, fresh water, access to, that's the environmental things you're looking for in the urban environment. Different when you're looking at the environment in indigenous vegetation area, outstanding natural landscapes or whatever, quite different values. You'll have different policies applying. So for me, these objectives and policies, their role is to take all that big national policy statement stuff and RMA and all of those things, stick it in your plan and say, this is what it means for us. We never have to go and look at those other documents again because we've said what it is we're doing. And I don't get that yet. But I don't think it's unable to be done. I think
it's just a draft. I should have said this is the rough is very...
And that's fine. And I think so what I'm suggesting is that if I took this out to the community, I don't know what...
That's not going to the community.
No. So I think there's a little work to be done, and my thinking would be that you do stick with that mountains to the sea, and you do stick with the values. The environment is the value because the environment sustains the economy, sustains the people. The people then sustain the environment. So the two go hand in hand. What you've got to do is just work your way through a little, and for me, that's what I'm looking for. I don't see it. I have concerns that the strategic directions are supposedly to be given primacy. I'd be very careful about that. It's a minefield to say one, and I have worked with plans where they have primacy in them. The Christchurch plan is one where there's specific primacy, but that's about earthquake recovery. And that was
So
the
you're talking
policy.
about hierarchy.
Hierarchy of objectives and policies. So you say, whatever you do,
alongside each other. They're all important.
This one here is the most important for us. That's the one we're going to always go for. And all of these ones give effect to that overarching objective. So I think there's quite a little bit of work to be done there. I didn't get any flavour of the coast coming out in here, and one of the things you have to do is produce a coastal plan. And I couldn't find any policies or anything here about coast or about air. There'll be an air plan as part of this document. I didn't get any understanding of what the issues about the plan were. So I think there's a framework there, and it's a matter of taking this, putting into that mountains to the sea, what are the different things happening along the way, put your policies into some sort of geographic approach, and then you can see where the priorities and policy directions lie. So apologies for that, but I appreciated the kororo. It gave me what I'd been thinking in my head. You said it, so thank you.
Any other feedback or questions? So I'm just going to say we are looking at, so what, Nadine, what did you, I was listening with only one ear when Nadine spoke. Apologies, Nadine. Yeah, we will definitely get there.
So through your worship, what Nadine or the CE recommended was taking out the Māori kupu from the recommendation for now because we need to do some further work on how to represent that and express that.
Okay, Aubrey, did you wanted to add something else?
Yes, I actually wanted to pivot to option 1, ki uta ki tai. I think, like, I understand the Te Tairāwhiti explanation that Yvonne gave, and I think that the only difference was that holding the community and economic to the same level as the environment, and I don't think that's necessary. Like, for all the reasons that we've just talked about just now, the environment should be placed as the priority at the top, which is covered under ki uta ki tai. And I also think that there's a danger in the descriptive, explicit language of te taiao, and that sometimes descriptive is restrictive. And that when the reason that I went to Te Rurunga o Kaikohe and I read how they utilised ki uta ki tai, it was because they are of a similar size to us. They've been through some similar events that we've been through, and they also have a similar landscape and a similar economic makeup. So I read theirs to see what our ki uta ki tai could possibly look like by reading an example where I could feel connections to, because it had similarities between Te Tairāwhiti and Kaikohe. So I actually want to recommend that the option is ki uta ki tai, and that it is a Tairāwhiti tūranganui ākiwa, Te Tairāwhiti whānui interpretation for the purposes of the TRMP of what our ki uta ki tai is, what is our mountains to moana.
Any objections from committee members or people that want, or from staff? Not objections, but I just don't want to put something and then everyone got their knuckle dusters out and we're ready to take each other out. I do want to give everyone the opportunity to comment. Not to decide, to comment. Colin speaking.
I was taking a breath. It's a very aspirational thing we're dealing with.
And that's it.
That's it.
That's what we, from the top, say we want a healthy Tairāwhiti, and then the policies will fall out of that.
And I mean, I do feel the lack of mention of the economy out there, which is, our economy is agricultural, horticultural, and it is going to be very affected by what we do here. And I do think it needs to be in there more, rather than just it's going to be looked after. That does worry me. But then I come back to it, yes, this is the aspirational document, and we are going to look after the farming, horticultural community within that.
Well, I would hope we have a healthy Tairāwhiti and we look after everyone. After our foresters, after our farmers.
I'm seeing an area that is potentially going to get hit hard, that's all. And that's the area I'm looking out for.
I hope you're looking out for everyone.
Oh, absolutely.
Just checking in.
Yeah. So I was organic for 25 years.
Right. No, that's fantastic. I just want to make sure you don't just wear one hat.
And you would not want to impose that on someone. And there's a danger here that if we go too aspirational and too imposing, we could really make farming difficult. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you for that. Larry?
I appreciate having my words in here, but as we've seen, there's so many different interpretations of those different words within regions and even within our region. What Aubrey's already identified. And if you've got, say, a person coming in from overseas, just all they know is English, and they got to ring our decisions made under the TRMP would be guided by the concept of ki uta ki tai.
Well, hopefully they sharpen up, because here in Tairāwhiti we speak both languages.
I mean, through you, Your Worship, maybe just to clarify, there will be a lot more detail around.
But I think you need to have some interpretation of what that is actually meaning in this document. That's all I'm saying. I applaud Māori language, and that's what we are. So we've got to incorporate that, but there needs to be some, it needs to be an interpretation of what does that mean.
So through you, Your Worship, the idea is we go away, work something out.
And as long as that interpretation, that English interpretation, is fine by everybody else, our Maori community, well, that's fine, you know. But this is a document that people are going to read and interpret of what they can do and what they can't do, and you know, so this needs to be right, and you know, by even us now going to say option 1 is what we're going to go and do, I'm not ready for that actually. At this particular point in time myself, I wouldn't be voting in favour of it at all. I'm not ready to make a commitment to do this particular under option 1 when it is still, to me, quite vague.
So through you, Your Worship, just to clarify, what we're not seeking here is something that will now be put into the plan and that will never change. What we're looking for is a guiding direction so staff can go away, potentially with a smaller working group in terms of how we use kupu Māori, and develop some provisions that reflect this overarching principle. There is a lot more detail and wording to come. This is just the very start of the process. So I don't want you to think that by selecting a preferred option for that overarching direction at this point that you are locking yourselves into language that you won't be able to change or you will receive no further clarity on. You'll receive much, much more.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, when I'm looking down here, I'm looking at a preferred option, and I think, okay, well, it does actually incorporate some of the elements that I would be quite comfortable with, but now we're looking at changing it to another option, and I'm just not ready to do that, because this is going to form the basis of what we're going to do for the future. So, yeah, I think.
So do you prefer option 4? Is that where you were leaning towards?
I could look, yeah. I mean, the dialogue on that is probably in a bit more of a softer interpretation than option 1. Option 1 is quite, yeah. You know, and you know, when you're talking about interconnectedness of the whole environment, you know, there's a lot of words in there that how do you interpret that? You know? I know in my mind how I would.
Josh, thank you, Larry.
I would just like to point out that option 4 is combining option 1 and another option. So technically, by supporting option 4, we're still supporting option 1. But one of our councillors has put forward just option 1. So I just wanted to point out that discrepancy in regards to the current core. Again, I'm comfortable with what Councillor Ree has actually put forward in regards to option 1, given that we know that there's going to be more stuff that comes back in regards to this, and it's just that at the top overarching policy framework in order to be able to guide us. I actually commend Councillor Rea for the diligence in which she looked at this paper with her skill set, and that's something to really commend. What I would like to encourage the other members of this committee is in your key skill set to also apply that same diligence so we can benefit from Councillor Rea's expertise and all of each of our individual expertise in order to be able to come. I would have loved to have heard that same level of rigour applied in regards to the other concepts that aren't the Te Reo Māori concepts coming from some of our other committee members. It's the thing that we need to be doing around this table for this TRMP, because this is the most important thing that we will be doing for our region for decades to come. And it relies on each of us in our own lane applying that kind of rigour while we're reading this. I'm actually quite frustrated with the conversation that we've got into to be quite honest, because this is actually quite straightforward in regards to an overarching thing. So I'm happy to support the motion for option 1, given staff have given an undertaking to bring back more work. So I'm more than happy to second that.
I will be interested also, Sarah and Alan, what you think just in regards to us, what you've heard here, and I love discussions like this because I am a firm believer in democracy. I believe every one of us wear a different hat, and often I take this, what Tairāwhiti sometimes say, she might not be in certain areas, she would say, hey guys, this is not my area, but I'm quite happy for you to carry that load. This is not my expertise, and I'm quite happy to take guidance from others in this space, and this is how I think democracy works. We bring different voices from different cultures, different backgrounds, different educations, different worldviews, different aspirations together, and we try to put it in a succinct policy that our community are represented in, that they can be proud of, and where all 4 well-beings have a leg in the stool. So it is not straightforward just to say we prioritise this or we don't do that. So I will also be interested in your thought as we pivot through this. And then I do want to ask, before we lean into that, do we need to make a decision today?
It would be good to have at least some direction. I mean, maybe adopt is too strong.
Yeah. All good. Good.
So
Sarah.
I'm happy to kick off, and I wanted to acknowledge Councillor Wharehinga, your kōrero around the Resource Management Act and the framing. You know, Section 5, the purpose, enabling people and communities to provide for their social, economic and cultural wellbeing, health and safety, while, and that is the bottom line that's being discussed here. So it is a package of framing. I also wanted to tautoko the kōrero from Councillor Ria around te uta ki tai and the concept of the environment within that made complete sense to me, but it is at the end of the day a governance matter as to whether you want to wrap te tai out in with te uta ki tai. I'm just going to leave it at that. Made sense to me. And if you are looking to simplify and a concept can be reflected in option 1, then by all means simplify would be my encouragement. A few other technical bits and pieces I picked up as I reviewed the papers, but I just think given the timing, we'll perhaps have an offline. Very small, very technical, but I'll hand over through you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think option 1 does enable for the various values about the natural environment to come through into that option 1, which picks up on those other pieces of legislation. So I'm happy to support option 1 as the sort of the direction to move for, but as I said before, it's really then about how you express those natural, built and other environments as you're going through from the mountains to the sea. So now I think that's the trick. Yeah. So I think we're there. The direction's right. We've just got to frame it up in a Tairāwhiti way. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any more questions or statements, or if not, I do have a mover for option 1. So this is what Joe is saying. This is an overarching way that we are moving towards. We can pivot and change it, and as we see how things develop, and it is that interconnectedness in everything we try to do, which include the social, economic, cultural, environmental well-beings of our community. The last thing we want to do is to want to exclude or minimise a well-being in our community. I think what we are trying to do here is to make sure we have a balance. And I do hope as a committee we keep that as our North Star. We are trying to strike a balance in order to make our land, our people, our water thrive and live in harmony with each other. I don't think in the past, in the whole of New Zealand, well, we just look at the RMA, which has been limping along since 1991, we haven't done it well, and there is a lot of work ahead of us. But what a great opportunity for us. Now with the RMA being reviewed, us being in this position where we can make decisions and get the input from our community, get the input from our farmers, get the input from our foresters, from tangata whenua, from iwi, from hapu, from councillors, from everyday business operators, from our children, everyone giving input, and hopefully we have a plan that is fit for purpose, and our children and our grandchildren will be proud and live in an environment and operate in an environment where it is safe and healthy. So I think if we look at it from that way, we are not pinning ourselves down today to anything. If anyone wants to make another discussion before I put this to the vote, by all means. But what I want yeah, but no one's seconded it. So, anyone want to speak? Otherwise, I'm going to put option 1, which was moved by Councillor Ria, seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour? Aye. Aye. Contrary?
Aye.
When you say, okay, let me just go through this again. When I say all in favour, I would ask everyone, if you are in favour, to say aye. If I then say contrary, then you say no. Okay. So all in favour? Aye. Aye. Contrary?
No.
Thank you. Carried. Okay. Let us move to our next report, which is on page. So this is our overlay 3B mapping councillors. So Alan and Sarah, you would not have seen this before. We have had, Yannick, did you do a presentation to us a while back? You did a presentation about the overlay 3B land. I'm sure we had.
We've certainly taken a report to committee previously. This one bounces off.
I'm sure someone did something.
It's not the 3B layer, it's...
Nah.
This is hot off the press, Your Worship.
Hot off the press, stuff like that. So what I take this as read. What we are talking about is staff going out with a verification process. So we are not saying anything here today, but what we are saying is, can you please make sure it's fit for purpose, it's tested. And we can proudly go out and say 3, because there are 3, it's Manaki Whenua, it is a peer review by us, and then the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. So if people are happy with that, do I have a seconded by Councillor Foster? Any discussion in regards to this paper? No. All in favour? See, we can work fast. You thought Alan and Sarah was thinking, oh my goodie, we will have to come for 4 days at a time. Sometimes we do just whip through stuff when it is straightforward, but I do want to encourage discussion. It is so important for us. The previous discussion we had to make sure we bring all those different inputs from everywhere, and it's balanced in the end. Okay, page 53. We are now talking about establishing. So Yannick, are you talking to us about the water quality expert panel? Or who is going to do the...
It is Yannick.
You look behind yourself.
I was looking for Paul, actually. He's probably more of an expert on the expert panel than I am, but I'll give it a bit of a nudge and we'll see where we go. So this piece of work fits in the context of our regional freshwater plan provisions and the Waipawa Catchment Plan. As a part of our options development, where we explore ways to manage both water quality and water quantity, we need to develop an evidence base. There's a range of ways that you can develop that evidence base. And what we're particularly interested in is, I guess, tackling some of the big ticket items that relate to freshwater, but also probably to land use. So our big ticket items are allocation, water quantity on the potable bay flats. That's a huge matter for our community, and we need to get that right. But also, and it perhaps speaks to some of the kōrero that we're having around that wider sort of TRMP, RPS matter, is sediment. It's a huge issue for us because of our geographic context and the way that settlement has occurred over the last 150 years, that we find ourselves having to respond to an ongoing issue around the vulnerability of our land to erosion and stability, which generates a lot of effects within our receiving environments. So sediment is a huge one for us, as is E. coli. Now these have attendant impacts on...
Sorry, Yana, can I get you to speak a little louder, please?
Just speak up a bit, thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So, water quantity and allocation on the Poverty Bay Flats. Sediment across our region is huge, as you all know. And E. coli as well as an effect from farming on our waterways. And they affect different values within the receiving environment. And we acknowledge those are the big issues for us within our freshwater planning framework. And so we are pulling together the evidence we need to manage those issues appropriately. And so what we looked at was the formation of an expert panel to address those three areas of work. Now there are different ways you can generate data or information to help you develop options and evaluate the best course, but what we're recommending here is the formation of a panel of experts across a range of specialty topics to advise, to inform, to test the scenarios that we put to them around allocation in the first instance, but also sediment, how we manage that, what the effects are on things like invertebrates, on things like swimming, and cultural values that we hold as taonga to the natural environment. So what we're proposing is basically a process where we stand up this panel, these experts, and to run through the scenario testing. The output is a report that compiles the conversations that these experts are having around those three areas. And I guess that's what we're looking for in a nutshell, is some endorsement to progress this piece of work.
Thank you for that, Yannick. Any questions? So we're on page 53, where we talk about establishing a water quality expert panel. It's relatively straightforward, but any questions? Josh?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just a few kind of, I guess, procedural questions, like frequency of meetings, like what are you envisaging in regards to like the utilisation of this expert panel, and then also the second query in my head, like I think it's sensible, but just again in terms of my obligations and elected we will be looking in region, take a kind of in region first approach in order to be able to gather the expertise around this. So just those kind of things. I'm just trying to think of its overall impact on the TRMP budget and all that kind of stuff.
Through you, Your Worship, in terms of the frequency of, we will be looking at a fairly discrete process where we bring those experts in for 3 to 4 workshops all day, so quite intensive, but in and out. The timing is such that we really need to roll this quite quickly to influence and inform the plan development. So it's quite surgical. In terms of where the experts come from, we're looking at an open tender process, but our expectation is that at least some of the experts have very detailed understanding of our region. In fact, that's a prerequisite. It's great to have experts from around the country, but really, really important for us is that really detailed knowledge, particularly for Mātauranga.
Sorry, it's supplementary. The just noting that the next step stuff on page 63 and just looking at what the process is going to be. Once that report, so the first TRMP committee meeting in 2025, the report comes back. So that will be the expert panel no longer be needed past that, or will it still be continuing? I just wasn't too sure because the comments is that it's an update to this committee.
What step is there?
Sorry, page 63, just in terms of next steps.
Third in the table.
Through your Chair, Your Worship, yeah, we'd be looking to complete that process where the panel provides its expertise to our team. We use that expertise, turn it into a report that basically has all the information that drives our mahi, and then we bring that back to Council for approval, and we go forward from there. Whether we continue to use that expertise is probably something that we're looking at with regards to water quantity in particular, and potentially standing up a similar panel of experts to look at quantity in greater detail.
Thank you.
And then Colin. Sarah and then Colin.
Thank you. Interested in Mātauranga expertise. One of my first questions was going to be, have they been anticipated, and how will Mātauranga be incorporated into the panel's analysis and advice? But I've subsequently seen on page 62, paragraph 37, that you would look to apply a Mātauranga Māori lens to the panel's kaupapa. A lens, can you expand on what specific skills in Mātauranga will be sought through the panel? I haven't seen it listed in the skill set on page 60.
Through you, Your Worship, it's probably one of the more difficult areas that we've had to traverse in terms of what we envisage that Mātauranga expertise to look like. We've certainly had conversations around what that might look like, but in terms of landing and understanding how it might be integrated with this wider piece of work, it's probably an uncertainty from us at this stage, but we will look to navigate that as we progress our procurement. So probably not a clear answer at this stage.
I just encourage, yes, sorry, through you, Your Worship, I just encourage you to keep that front of mind in the skill sets, acknowledging the uncertainty.
Thank you, Your Worship. If you want a good argument, get two experts and have a good discussion. So, my way of thinking, this panel will be crucial. And how they are weighted, one way or the other, will be crucial to the decision that comes out of that panel. So the selection of that panel is a very critical part of the process. Talking to Joe at the break, and the cost of this process, a big cost of this process can come at the end when there is appeals and litigations. And so if we've got the wrong experts and the farmers out there have other experts that disagree, that appeals process is going to escalate. Is it not sensible to consult with our community on the selection of those experts, and so that they are happy? Granted, we don't want to be biased with them, but we want to start off on a level foot. If we have the right experts, we'll have less trouble at the end, is what I'm saying.
That can cut both ways, eh?
It totally can cut both ways. But there's no doubt that if we get it right, it will be a smoother process. And
I guess it's how you determine right. Right to us may not.
Sorry, can you speak up, Yannick?
Right to us may not be right to other groups, and let's be honest, this is a political space that we entertain, where different groups have different interests and different views of where the balance should be, and that's what we're navigating, is what that space looks like. It's not an easy space to navigate, and there's no guarantees that we can hit any risks off in terms of appeal or submissions or mediation at the pass with any particular avenue that we take. Let's say that we engage with the farming community and we get support and agreement around experts there. Well, then on the other side, we've got conservation interests, environmental interests, and they've also got a position which they may actually assert when we go to notification. So there's no certainty here, but what we can do is be confident in terms of our own process of selection and engage our community, as we always do, over the process and what our findings are. Because at the end of the day, the findings themselves, it's just data. We're not making a decision there. What we're saying is, this is what we understand our landscape to look like. What do you think? And then the options can be discussed before we get to that critical point.
Awesome. Hey, I would love to stay. I'm really enjoying this, but I'm going to go. It was lovely meeting both of you, and we will catch up again. Thank you for your very valuable contributions. Thank you to our committee as well. It should only be 30 more minutes, because I did promise you'll be out of here at 12. Maybe I was saying I will be out of here at 12. So Josh, if you can just finish off that report and then a quick discussion on the Mōtū. Sure. And we will catch up soon. Take care.
Councillor Rea.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report, Yannick. I read it. I listened to the conversations over the table. I support the paper. I want to move it.
Do you have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Foster.
Just a
yes. Yeah, I wasn't going to move it on. Were there any other? Do you have some?
Yeah, just the numbers. I couldn't see the numbers in here about how big this panel's going to be.
Yannick, do you want to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Your Chair.
Speak up, Yannick.
I'm too quiet. I apologise. Under the recommendations, Councillor, we've got experts around erosion and sediment, freshwater ecosystems, periphyton, mātauranga, groundwater and estuary. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6.
Yeah, I saw that.
So relatively agile.
Yeah.
Certainly not looking for a large group of people, but perhaps in response to Councillor Alder's thoughts, agility is really important because the bigger you make the group, the less agreement.
That's right.
The harder it is to find agreement, so we are mindful of agility as well.
Well, if there are no other questions, it's been moved by Councillor Lee, seconded by Councillor Foster. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Carried. That take us to page 64, the Mōtū Catchment.
That's Yannick again.
Oh,
My computer's about to restart, so I'm...
Do you want to maybe come up over here? Because the whole reason why we have Councillor Alder over here is so that we're closer.
It's also a quiet spot here,
Yeah. It's not like you to be quiet, Yannick.
Okay, thank you. This is a bit of a slow burn. As you all know, we've brought several papers to this forum, to Council over the years. We cracked on with this just by way of context. Around mid-2020, it was the first cab off the rank of our 7 catchment plans. Unfortunately, we were affected by COVID midway through our engagement. which did hamper things, and then more recently with Cyclone Gabrielle, as well as the fact that we were deploying across the rest of our freshwater program and other parts of the TRMP review. So this has been a bit of a slow burn, but we have finalised a draft, and it has been sitting patiently there for movement to the next step, I guess. Just a bit of a story or narrative around the development of the Upper Mōtū Catchment Plan. It's a very simple story, actually. What we have is quite a unique landscape in the sort of the upper western parts of our region, sort of the lowland hills moving into the Raukumara Ranges. It's a unique geology, and it's a unique situation where we have an upper catchment that exports into the Bay of Plenty region. Now, the unusual thing about that is actually we've got the farming in the headwaters and the pristine stuff downstream. It's usually the other way around. And so that's something that we're mindful of managing appropriately because of the cross-boundary matters there that we have to observe. The story of the Mōtū was ngahere for a long time, and then it was milled and cleared for farming. And there are kind of two landscapes there. There is the settled landscape, which has a lot of farming on the river terraces, and then you've got the ngahere that's still remnant there that provides for a lot of the pristine freshwater values that we find, and some really good remnant areas, and perhaps some of the best water quality across our region as well. We began engagement in the same fashion that we're doing for all of our catchment plans, which is that we have a community hui, and then we form an advisory group, and then we meet with our community on a regular basis until we form up a draft, come back to the community with that draft, and then reports from them, and we also engage with stakeholders. Now, the key issue around the Mōtū Catchment Plan is that on the farmed terraces there is some intensive grazing and stock are entering the waterways, and there are two effects basically. One is the effects of bank destabilisation on sediment, so we have clarity issues and we have deposit and sediment issues on that settled landscape, and we have E. coli issues. That's the key issue that we're seeing in a nutshell. Now, that area is quite high in phosphorus as well, and phosphorus binds to sediment. So where you have a sediment issue, you have a phosphorus issue. Now, where you have a sediment issue, you also have issues with your macrophytes and your ecosystem health. So everything kind of boils down to how that intensive farming within that catchment area is having an impact on the way. So that's kind of the narrative or the story in a nutshell, and that's what we're managing in the catchment plan in a nutshell as well, is that we're looking at how we can work with our farming community to manage the erosion risk, because most of that sediment is stream bank erosion, and how we manage E. coli. In terms of water quantity, we identified that there's actually not a lot of water available during the summertime. The Mōtū River does get very low during the summertime, and we've also recognised, at least with the Waitangirua data that Niwa have been collecting over the last 30 years, is that we're seeing a gradual decline as well, and that could be an effect of climate change. So with that in mind, what we are looking for is a bit of a shift in terms of how we manage quantity, water quantity and allocation, and that is that we are looking to manage it to the median rather than the mean annual low flow. So the median rather than the average. And that's a higher bar, but that also provides for the recreational component of trout fishery, but also for tuna, most importantly, for mahi no kai. And so all the policy that we're developing within this catchment plan is really framed around managing for the high freshwater values within that catchment, how we manage sediment and how we manage E. coli, and how we keep flows where they are. So future intensive development or activities, farming activities, don't further impact on those values. That's it in a nutshell.
Do we have any questions? Councillor Reid.
Lots of questions, you know me, Yannick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, because I recall the last 2 times I think the Mōtū Catchment Plan has been brought to us at Council, and I do love the plan itself. I do love the plan itself. It is, however, the same concern I had from the last time it was brought, is that the taha Māori, the ideas of Ngā Pōtiki specifically as the mana whenua of that area have not been captured or reflected. And given that, like Te Whakatohea also, because they are also have claim in that catchment area, but given that the time that the catchment here, the compilation, I suppose, of all the information, they were going through the thick of their Waitangi settlement claims. So we didn't get any engagement from that side. So when you read the report, there's nothing about whakatohea in it at all. So they get totally missed out of the catchment plan. There's a few ideas like when we talk about pātaka kai, mahinga kai, or that's traditional food gathering, that's a really important thing, but you can't do kohinga kai without pātaka kai. So the pātaka is the actual food storage. So without the lovely waterways with these beautiful areas of thick, sweet watercress, which are quite a few lovely patches, I'm told, out at Mōtū. Without those pātaka and the looking after of those areas that are pātaka, you can't actually do the action of mahinga kai, kohi kai. You can't do that if there's no pātaka to begin with, I suppose. Just talking about where I mentioned about the iwi engagement, the Upper Mōtū catchment falls on the edge of the rohe of 5 iwi. However, it was not an area of main habitation, but rather a landscape that was travelled through. This is page 74 under iwi engagement. It was, but that doesn't actually highlight how so important those particular travel areas were. So in the Mōtū catchment, there's Mōtū, there's Matawai, and there's Whakapau Pākihi. And Whakapau Pākihi actually is extremely important in both Te Aitanga Mahaki, Ngā Pōtiki, and also to our Ngāuri o Te Koti, because Te Koti also used that walkway to traverse, and so it does say here was travelled through. But I did write some actual notes so that I don't have to remember all of this. I also did some, the cultural environment. So this refers to this iwi engagement as well as the cultural environment section of the report, of the catchment plan. So I did a bit of research, Te Pua Waitanga o Hine Ākua. This is a learning education project under Te Runanga o Turanganui a Kiwa, where extensive research has been undertaken to gather the information around Whakarau, who is the youngest son of Mahaki and Hine Tapuaro, and he is the eponymous ancestor of Ngā Pōtiki, who is the hapu of the area of this catchment plan that we're talking about. There should be additional information added in regard to the cultural environment, including Poke Whino, Mōtū Hora, who are both tipuna maunga that lie in front of Maunga Haumi or Maunga Haumia. Whakapau Pākihi, the traditional trail I was talking about, many of our tipuna would traverse their lands as the seasons changed. This is demonstrated in Horauta by Rongo Whakaata Halbert on page 431, map 14, a cluster of names of the tributaries along the forestry reserve block imply a possible settlement at one point in time.
There's no acknowledgement to the cultural significance of Whakapau Pākehī Trail, which has a huge significance to Te Aitanga Mahaki, given that Tamatai Pūnua, the father of Mahaki, used that trail. So when you go there, there's this, when you go towards Matawai Mōtū, there's this huge, beautiful carving, a beautiful Māori carving on the side. And that is Hine Tapuaro. I think it says Hine Tapuaro. The new bridgeway there is called Te Whitinga o Tamatai Pūnua. So that bridge is named after this tipuna, Tamatai Pūnua, who traversed across Whakapau Pākehī. And that he was Mahaki's father. So he is the grandfather of Te Aitanga Mahaki. So see, none of this cultural significance and importance is reflected anywhere in the catchment plan. So that for me is, I agree to everything in the plan. The data is awesome, the objectives and how you want to achieve things and go about doing things is awesome, but there's hardly any reo Māori, mana whenua perspective, mana whenua whakaro in the plan, and that's probably the biggest issue that I have. As well as those things, I just wanted, it also says in here that thing we talked about in the first paper, restore the modi of degraded way, so those areas to please look at. And also, in some paragraphs it says iwi and hapu, in other paragraphs it says tangata whenua, and in other paragraphs it says mana whenua. What's the difference? Can anybody tell me what the difference is? Because it's hard to, like, we actually need to have a bit of a workshop on it at our next hui with Jean so that we can get a consensus about what is the difference between tangata whenua, mana whenua, iwi and hapu. And those are those three words, they're all kind of sprinkled throughout the catchment. There is the
Do you want Jean to answer these parts, or do you come back?
Oh.
Because Jean does have his hand.
Oh, yes, okay, yeah.
Response. And over to you, Jean.
Tēnā tātou, and through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Tēnā koe, Councillor Ria, tika tat o kōrero. Hoki aku maharai ki te timatanga o tērā kaupapa. So I think back to when I first started at council and became involved in some of the early discussions in the Mōtū catchment plan pre-COVID. Now still very wet behind the ears, so to speak, in terms of my time at council, but having a high level understanding of the MPSFM and then also participating in that catchment group in those discussions, we really took direction from Te Aitanga Mahaki leadership about the Mōtū catchment plan and how that should roll out. Now, admittedly, my role and our team was only brand new in the council and still finding our feet. So we didn't necessarily have the positioning and the fashion in which now we're engaging the rest of the region in Te Mana o Te Wai sort of led conversations. But we took orders, really, to be fair, took direction. Yannick may have kōrero to add in that regard, and certainly take on board that the plan is void of that stuff, but I would go as far as to say that that those aspects of the Mōtū catchment plan, in my opinion, weren't a priority or seen as important necessarily by those leading the iwi voice in that catchment planning process at the time. And while I'm not here to throw shade, I just think it's important that we highlight that as council officers and council staff, we took a lead and a direction in that plan, and I think we followed and achieved what was asked of us, but certainly acknowledge that there's a difference between the way in which the Mōtū plan, Mōtū catchment plan has been worked through as to compared to other catchments across the region. And I thought it important to highlight that. Yannick may have something to add.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I would add is whether Councillor Ria has any suggestions is about how we integrate that, because we're very much open to making necessary amendments. And I appreciate there's some engagement happening in that space as well that we are able to attend to and respond to as well.
You still had some other
Yes,
questions?
yes, I did.
And then we'll come to you.
I suppose just to add to what Jean and Yannick has just said, so yesterday actually I caught up with Jo Buckridge. I see her name is listed here as the Ngāpuo Tiki representative, and I said to her, so you have been involved in the catchment planning? She goes, no, I wouldn't call it that. And I said, so how have you been involved in the catchment planning? She goes, I was dragged along to a couple of meetings. I didn't understand what catchment planning was. I'm now only really understanding it. So I said, right, you need to have a read of this paper. And she says, there's nothing about us in here. And so there, like how Jean was, she was new in her role with the marae. She had only just stepped into this leadership position with Ngāpuo Tiki, and she was still catching up on all of the things that were happening. And so she didn't, and she felt like her contributions, and I've said this before, her contributions were not valued amongst the catchment board, that there were other primary focuses, like forest, like farming, like the trout. So there were other focuses that as a board they deemed, and she just felt like her voice wasn't heard. It wasn't heard and it wasn't received, and it's not captured in the catchment plan, or her voice on behalf of her whānau. What is Te Wai o Ngāhere?
It's the name that we gave to one of the freshwater management units.
Oh, okay. What does it mean?
Te Wai o Ngāhere, the waters of the Ngāhere. So that's to recognise that, you know, a lot of that FMU is in conservation and safeguard.
Yeah. Okay. It's Māori words, but it's written in an English sentence structure. I'm just gonna say that. Oh right, yes, we talked about tangata whenua and here, this bit here. It is on page 178 under cultural, and at the bottom in the third bullet point it says, enable Māori landowners in the catchment to continue to be ahika within the catchment as they are supported financially by their farming business. I have a huge issue with that particular. Ahika is defined in that paragraph as being something associated to economy, and it absolutely is not. Tangata whenua actually would be the better, more broader term to explain the relationship of Māori landowners in the catchment, but to deem them ahika, when ahika is a word that comes from generations and generations and generations of occupation, it's not right. Occupation and whakapapa and those ties to the land. So I just want to have that the use of that word ahika to enable Māori landowners, because I've said this before, that not all the Māori landowners in the Mōtū catchment are of Te Aitanga Māhaki, Te Whānau Apunui, Ngāpuo Tiki or Te Whakatohea. Just like any other place, they come in from out of the district and they buy a piece of land. That does not make you ahika, and it does not make you mana whenua. And that's not a growling, it's just not. It's just not. Okay, right. I think I'm nearly done. Oh yes, the additions of pātaka kai alongside those lines about mahinga kai. And that's me. That's a wrap. But otherwise, I love everything else about it, Yannick, and I will be prepared to move it on because I want it to get moving, because it's a very exciting.
it's very exciting. I can't wait for the work to happen. And I want to move it, but I want to ensure that it's moved given that the lack of mana whenua voice is addressed and is heard in this catchment plan.
So that was actually going to be the question post this, was our process from here, given that this has been in train since 2020, 19, I think it's 2020. Yeah. So the process from here, given the very valid, constructive feedback that's already been acknowledged by Jean, and noting also that this is coming to us on the Sustainable Tairāwhiti on the 4th of September for adoption. You know, I have all of that kind of stuff. So where to from here?
Mr. Chair, I think we have time to finesse the document before it proceeds to approval. And given that there is some engagement happening in the Mōtū space at the moment, I think we could probably leverage off and benefit from, and perhaps to receive some further guidance from Councillor Rea in regard to the wording. I think if we could do that, then potentially we're in a position where we can notify. I think we have time to do that. So perhaps conditional on further support and refinement from mana whenua.
Okay, we can work up with that. Yes. Just quickly to you in terms of process, but I did have Colin here before you ask some questions.
No problem. So I just wanted to pick up on that because I'd seen on page 165 where we're talking about the clause 4A, which is where you take the draft and get comment. And I've got here paragraph 97, to complete this subsection following consultation. So has that step still have to be done before the proposed plan gets taken to the council in September?
It has to happen as well.
Okay, so there's an avenue for those issues, councillor, that you've raised to then come through into that comments they've specifically made that the council must have particular regard to. So I think sounds like there's a process there to fix the hole.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Alden.
Thank you. It's quite good you drew me there. It reminded me that those consults, the nearest one was 19th of October 22. We're going to page 76, and points 46 and 47 are outlining the issues that have come between this document and the community, I feel. And consultation is going to be the most important part of laying these things out. And it is concerning that we have had these issues that maybe have got in the way of that. And it does worry me that that community doesn't really know what's happening here. Especially when you look at some of the costs that they are going to be facing in the way of building fences and fencing of swamp land, etc., etc. And Joe's comment on that every step we take, it gets harder to break it back. And so if by passing this, before I feel confident that that community knows exactly what it is that's being passed, is there an issue? Do you feel confident that the community, farming community, 100% know what's in there?
Mr. Chair? Yes.
You do? And they're 100% happy with it?
Well, they have actually been instrumental in refining the document.
Okay.
We went through the advisory group process, ended up with a draft that was actually well circulated with the farming community through one of the catchments. So there's a catchment group in the Mōtū as well, responsible for fencing and planting, as you may know. And they were quite well involved in this process as well. The fourth community hui we had was actually to go down through the document step by step and to say, okay, what are the things that are live for you that we need to look and manage carefully. And so there was some degree of finessing there. There was probably an unusual degree of detail that we went through with the farming community, and it was well attended.
All right, on the strength of that, I'll move it, or second it. Where are we at?
I think there was a moving already here, and
Yeah, sorry, I did have a query related to Councillor Elder's comment about the farming community. I am interested in how the impact on the farming community will be mitigated, particularly through the transition process as these provisions come into full force, and what support might be envisaged. That was one question. There's another aspect related to our earlier kōrero about monitoring. What methodologies and measures are you proposing to keep track of the in-stream values associated with this plan change, and how frequent will those be? Sorry, two quite unrelated questions.
I wasn't planning on moving and seconding and then moving on with the paper. Just to circle back to what I was going to say was that it's been moved here with that amendment. If you were happy to second that, what Councillor Rea had moved, she'd also wanted that extra work, which has been acknowledged by Yannick to be undertaken in regards to filling that gap around the mana whenua kōrero that was just missing from there. You happy for that? And also, just as a reminder too, this decision that's being made here is endorsing this for approval at Sustainable Tairāwhiti. So just to make sure that we're on the page there. It's actually just an endorsement here to do this work, to bring to Sustainable Tairāwhiti, and it'll be there that the approval will take place. I'll hand it back over to you, Yannick, to respond to the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Always good to have a bit of distance. Question like that. Thank you. Those are two good questions. I guess in terms of transition, I guess there are three avenues there that we need to look at. A really, really critical part is going to be the rollout of freshwater farm planning, where our integrated catchment team actually works very closely with landowners in terms of identifying risk. This is going to be more important as we go forwards and we start to look at this land overlay 3B mapping as well, so that we're looking at a whole of catchment rather than just a freshwater thing. This is actually, what does the big picture look like for us from a land management and a risk management perspective, taking into account both farming and forestry. So our integrated catchments team are going to be an absolutely critical part of how we transition and give effect and implement this plan, particularly the actions that we identify in the action plan. The second part, I guess, is that we are now becoming increasingly cognizant of the need for a delivery component, so that our policy doesn't become isolated or stagnant, which there is a tendency or risk to do. So we're looking at how we might be able to support landowners, things like supporting with planting, with information, with mapping, that can actually underpin a lot of the work, a lot of the engagement work that farm planning will do as well. And I guess the third component is really to acknowledge the need to highlight this through our long-term planning process, to secure further resourcing for implementation. Now this is actually, it's a really interesting time, because this is one catchment plan, we've got 6 others to do. This is all of region in terms of how we change, how we envisage our living system, our regional living system to look like in the future, and how we get there. That's the resourcing question for us. So it's probably less about the policy and more about how we work together to achieve our vision and how we support the environmental outcomes that we identify. With regards to your second question, Sarah, I guess it's really about use of our state of environment monitoring as a proxy for monitoring and understanding our values and whether we're achieving what we set out to achieve. It's a bit, I guess, what we were concerned about in terms of the national objectives framework. So this process that we're setting out, we've got values and we've got environmental outcomes and actions that all makes a lot of sense to our community, because it's simple, right? It's what are the things that are important? What are we looking like now? Where are we going? And where it gets technical, I guess, is around our environmental monitoring and how we're able to use that in order to keep a track of whether we're going ahead or not. So our state of environmental monitoring is going to be critical, but it's about how we relay that with our community as well, and how we understand whether we're achieving our environmental outcomes. That, as well as reporting on a regular basis in terms of whether we're delivering upon our actions, which are time-bound. I'm not sure whether I've answered your question fully, but it's my understanding, I guess, in terms of how we might go about the monitoring and evaluation.
So perhaps just so Sarah, page 131, you've got a specific there about the monitoring that's proposed to be undertaken for this year, and monthly for this, and key attributes, and probably the one that Maria's interested in is the cultural Ahuranga monitoring, where it doesn't quite have the same detail as the other types of monitoring. It's obviously process from there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, if I can just speak further to that. That's a real challenge for us across Aotearoa, Alan, in terms of capturing, I guess, detailed information around the mahinga kai value and the bedding in of mātauranga Māori within our freshwater framework. It is a work in progress, and I guess, you know, our approach to it has been that you establish the kōrero and the relationships where, you know, you adopt a long-term approach to it, where hopefully over time you collect more of an understanding, and you build capacity and you work together and you find out more as you go. So there are definitely gaps there in our knowledge. We acknowledge that.
It's no different to anywhere else. Yep.
Yeah. Look, considering this is the first cab of the rank, and probably going back to Sarah's comment before around, you know, how are these landowners going to be helped, compensated, or whatever along the way, is that we're talking about a catchment here that's got fairly stable geology, and when I'm talking about that, that's actually going out to Bay of Plenty, which you get into a metal base, and then it's metal. When we start moving into here, the effects are going to be a lot huger. Like if we're going to be stipulating waterways need to be fenced off a certain distance, and we've got to remember, if you look at the national standards, this is not fencing off sheep, this is fencing off cattle. So we're talking, are we stipulating 2-wire electric, or are we stipulating a 9-wire fence? Because the difference is huge. 9-wire fence now today is $25,000, you know, a kilometre. And if you start looking on some of those farms, we're talking kilometres and kilometres, and it doesn't take very many kilometres. 4 kilometres, you're up to $100,000. And if they're put in the wrong place, I don't think the Mōtū catchment will be hit as hard, but if we put them in the wrong, we're only going to have a look around up the Waimata and etc. of a whole lot of plantings that have been done, a whole lot of waterways that were fenced off after what we've just experienced. There's no fences, there's no plants, there's no trees left. So I just want us to be really aware that this here is the first camp off the rank. What we put in place there won't necessarily work once we start moving into some of these other catchments. So, and we have to be aware of the cost, because if you start stipulating they have to be fenced off, the only logical way is to move them way back up past the high tide mark, then removes a whole lot of land from an economical base of farming. So I just, yeah, this is the first cap of the rank, but I think this will be the easiest one that we contend with. Like, we just really make sure along the track that and the monitoring, I touched on the monitoring side, is going to be really crucial to see how that pans out.
Mr. Chair, if I could speak to that, it's a fair point, Councillor Telfer, and it's one that we've experienced actually in other catchments. This is a result of how people have made decisions around land use in the past. And so what we're experiencing in Mōtū, for example, where you clear the ngāhere, it changes the hydrology of the catchment. So there's nothing to slow it down. And if there's nothing to slow it down, then it has more energy and it's hungrier. And so what we see in the Mōtū is a downgrading of land, so channelizing. So instead of the water filtering across the entire catchment area through Repo, through ngāhere, what it does is it goes the fastest route out of the system. And that's where you get these massive embankments. The river cuts down, and your erosion risk is enhanced. And so, I think our approach is to be pragmatic about this, work with farmers, but also back to that land overlay, looking at the whole of catchment and actually starting from headwaters and moving down to begin to attenuate flows. That's the part of the solution I think that we need to look at, because you're absolutely right. You could put in fencing, and people have, including the Mōtū actually. You can see some of those terraces, fencing is acting like a bridge where the river has actually cut away underneath it and it's just dangling because they put it a metre from the embankment, and you've got a 3-4 metre embankment. So these are the very pragmatic issues that we have to deal with, and we have to take a long-term solution-based approach to this and look at it headwaters and then migrate our interventions down.
Thank you, Janet. Well, one of the things that I would like to, before it's been moved and seconded, before I put the motion, is to also acknowledge that we had council representation involved in this, in the catchment. As we go into the next iterations of catchments, it would be really good to have an elected council person in touch there too, in order to be able to come back to this table and say Councillor Tairāwhiti had some of those questions in regards to who was feeding into that thing. It's a lot easier for us to be able to have that conversation amongst ourselves as councillors in order to be able to just kind of give ourselves that governance assurance in regards to that touch point. I do want to acknowledge the work that former councillors have done to be alongside these kinds of conversations. I'm glad that this is our first one our first horse out of the gate, and the robust feedback that has come, because of the robust feedback that has come back, because then it'll help strengthen what the next catchment planning documents look like as they come back. So hopefully by the time the last one comes back, it's just full of all of the goodness. It's an A-level kind of example of how to national example of how to do this. So I do want to credit staff, current and past, in regards to getting this to where it is. Yes, we've all acknowledged that it's imperfect, but it's an iterative process in order to be able to try and make it as best as we can. So if there are no other questions or comments, it's been moved by Councillor Rea, seconded by Councillor Alder. All those in favour? Aye. All those opposed? Carried. And that brings us to the last report of the day. Thank you very much for your diligence today, team. I formally close our meeting. Kia ora tātou. Is this fun?